Chapter 442. The double that Zhang Yan left behind could not be hidden for long. In less than 2 years, Duanmu Li, who personally entered the mountain to investigate, saw through it. When Duanmu Li found out, he was shocked and angry. But the formation was not broken. He did not know if Zhang Yan had left or gone to do something else. He was not afraid that Zhang Yan was still hiding in the mountain, but he was afraid that he would attract outsiders to come and steal the treasure. Especially when Zhang Yan knew the way to enter and leave Kunyu, it really made him restless. In the beginning, he ordered his disciples to be careful, be on guard, and guard the mountain gate. But after a dozen years, there was no movement, so he was slightly relieved. After a dozen years of peace, Duanmu Li did not take this matter to heart as seriously as before. If the other party did not die and coveted the treasure, he would have come here long ago and not wait until now. He closed the door and rejected guests, cultivating in peace, but the outside world was changing. 20 years ago, Lai Xian's sect used the Zhen Luo Union's massacre of the sect's disciples, gathered tens of thousands of disciples, and attacked Pingxi. But at this time, the Zhen Luo Union rebelled. Over the years, they fought a few times, but were always defeated, losing a large piece of land, and now retreating deep into the mountains. Because Pingxi was vast, and because Qing Shi Guan and Jin Ling sect were afraid that Lai Xian's sect's power was too great, they secretly held them back, and so their attack slowed down. But no one knew that Lai Xian's sect's big fanfare, on the surface, was to invade the celestial family's blessed land, but in reality, they had other intentions. And they prepared for more than 300 years. On this day, Duanmu Li was meditating when he suddenly felt a wave of irritation in his heart. He thought of a lesson and suddenly heard the sound of a jade bell and zither coming from outside. He couldn't help but be surprised and asked in a deep voice, "What's going on?" "Child, go out and take a look." The child received the order and went out, but not long after, he ran back. He pointed outside in panic and said, "Master, Master, there are many people outside the mountain." "What?" Duanmu Li stood up abruptly and thought to himself, "Don't tell me it's because of that Taoist Zhang." His mouth said, "Second Shidi, follow me to take a look." However, he called out a few times but didn't get a response. Only then did he realize that he hadn't seen this person for a day. He asked, "Where is Second Master?" Trembling with fear, the boy said, "Second Master has left the mountain just now." Duanmu Li fiercely tugged at his beard as he faintly felt that something was amiss. He hurriedly said, "Quickly go and summon Third Master." Outside Kun Island, there were more than 1,000 cultivators standing in the void. Above them, there were more than 10 cloud rafts lined up in a row. Daoren, who was dressed in a sun and moon robe, was sitting in the middle. Dozens of male and female disciples of different appearances were riding on boats and birds, riding on clouds and wind, accompanying him. There was another Taoist beside him. He was also sitting, but his expression was a little more vicious. Looking at his face, it was by Kechuan's master, Pang Yuzhong, Pang Zhenren. At this moment, a cloud of smoke flew out from Kun Island. It landed in front of Daoren and a fat Taoist appeared. He bowed from afar and said respectfully, "Hong'an welcomes the 2 Zhenrens." Daoren raised his eyelids slightly and said, "Hong'an, has the treasure been lost?" Hong'an hurriedly bowed and said, "Zhenren Gua, I have been guarding the mountain day and night, not daring to slack off. Now the treasure is still alive on the Turtle Snake Mountain, waiting for the celestial masters of Lai Xian's sect to come and retrieve it." After saying this, he bowed to Pang Yuzhong as if he was flattering him. Zhenren Guo waved the horsetail whisk in his hand and said, Since you are willing to worship my ancestor, then you can be considered as one of the members of Lai Xian's sect. After we get the treasure, we will reward you according to your contributions when we return." Hong'an was overjoyed and immediately knelt down and said, "Thank you, Zhenren." With this delay, Zhenren Pang was already a little impatient and said, "What are you waiting for? Why don't you lead the way?" Hong'an stood up and took the lead, leading the group into the mountain. At this moment, the sun was setting and Zhenren Guo saw that the ground was covered with auspicious trees and grass, the mountain was dyed and the scenery was beautiful. He slightly nodded and said, such a blessed land can be our sect's dojo. Pang Yuzhong also echoed, senior brother is right. How can such a mediocre person have the fortune to enjoy this land? They were wantonly commenting here and Hung An heard it clearly, but he looked calm as if what they said had nothing to do with him. When the disciples behind Jinren Gua and Jinren Pang looked at his back, they couldn't help but show disdain in their eyes. Hung An was flying forward when he suddenly stopped and looked at Duanmu Li and Lu Gua who were flying over from afar. His expression changed slightly and he bowed from afar and said, eldest senior brother. Duanmu Li's face was livid. He forcefully suppressed the boiling anger in his heart and his lips trembled a little as he said, Hung An, you, why are you doing this? Lu Gua was also unusually angry, her eyes were filled with anger as she stared at this second senior brother. Hung An didn't dare to look at the two of them and lowered his head, saying, eldest senior brother, there is a limit to a person's strength. With our cultivation base and lifespan, what's the use even if we occupy the spiritual item in this Turtle Snake Mountain? Why don't we offer it earlier in exchange for hundreds of years of wealth and bliss? Isn't that great? Duanmu Li stared at him for a while as if he had never known him before and laughed bitterly, to think that we have cultivated together for hundreds of years, I see you as my own flesh and blood. I didn't expect you to do such a thing, to actually hand over the treasure that has been passed down from generation to generation in the sect. Today, I will clean up the sect on behalf of my master. He raised his hand and struck out a bolt of lightning. Hung An turned pale with fright as he saw the lightning falling on his head. It was already too late to dodge. Spiritual Master Pang smiled coldly and pointed with his finger. Before the lightning could reach him, it dissipated halfway. He then said, fellow Taoist Duanmu, this Hung An is now a disciple of my Lai Xian sect. It's not up to you to deal with him. Duanmu Li glanced at him, then looked at Spiritual Master Gua and said sternly, Gua Mingda, do you think that I is easy to bully? If we really fight to the death, how many of these disciples of yours can survive? Without waiting for Spiritual Master Gua to speak, Pang Yuzhong chuckled and stood out, saying, Duanmu Li, don't think that I don't know your background. If your cultivation was still perfect, we would have hesitated for a while. But after you were severely injured by Ouyang Su of Zhenluo Union, you have been recuperating for all these years. Until now, you still haven't recovered. You're like a piece of paper. How can us two brothers be afraid of you? Duanmu Li knew that he couldn't be merciful today, but he wasn't willing to be captured without a fight. Just as he was about to make a move, Pang Yuzhong's eyes flashed and he was already in front of him. His sleeve shook slightly and a jade tablet flew out. This item didn't have any light, and its movement was extremely secretive. By the time Duanmu Li noticed it, it had already flown in front of him. Just as he was about to dodge, he saw the jade tablet emit a yellow light that covered him in an instant. He felt his body stiffen and his limbs didn't listen to him. At this moment, the jade tablet flew over and lightly knocked on his forehead. Then, his eyes rolled back. His eyes rolled back and he fell to the ground as if he had lost his soul. Pang Yuzhong waved his hand and called the jade tablet back. He said coldly, hand it over. Immediately, two disciples flew out from behind him and captured him. When Lu Guojian fought, his eldest senior brother was captured. His eyes were about to pop out of his eye sockets. He reached into his sleeve and wanted to take out a talisman to fight in the formation. Gua Mingda, who was sitting there, glanced at him. With a casual wave of his sleeve, a violent flow swept over and sent him flying. Another two disciples came up and easily captured him. One of them was a girl with a cloud and colorful pendant. She said with a smile, Master, this person is quite handsome. Why don't we bring him back and extract his soul to refine him into that god altar warrior? Gua Mingda waved his hand. He said indifferently, commit suicide yourself, don't ask me. The girl said happily, thank you, Master. Pang Yuzhong ordered his disciples to bring Duanmu Li before him and used a spell to wake him up. He asked, fellow Taoist Duanmu, are you willing to revere our ancestors as gods? Duanmu Li stared at him angrily and said, if you want to kill me, then kill me. If you want me, Daoren, to deceive my master and destroy my ancestors, I can't. Pang Yuzhong tried to persuade him again, but Duan Muli was still scolding him. Pang Yuzhong's patience was worn out. He said coldly, "Stubborn, there's no point in keeping you alive." He raised a finger and tapped on the center of Duan Muli's brows. Duan Muli's body trembled and he died in an instant. With the two of them gone, there was no one to stop them on Kun Island. Guomingda looked into the distance and pointed at a strange-shaped mountain. He said, "Hong'an, is this where the treasure is hidden?" Hong'an saw that his senior brother was so weak in front of the two of them. He couldn't help but feel glad that he made the choice earlier. With a fawning expression, he said, "Jinren Guo's eyes are sharp. This is the Turtle Snake Mountain. The treasure is in the mountain." Guomingda stroked his beard and nodded. He said, "You mentioned in the letter that someone entered the formation?" Hong An's expression changed slightly. He quickly lowered his head and said, "It's true. That day, I was afraid that something might go wrong, so I had no choice but to send a letter. But after all these years, there hasn't been any movement. He must have either left or died long ago." Guomingda turned around and said to Pang Yuzhong, "I heard that not only did this person destroy a branch of our sect, he also killed one of junior brother Pang's disciples." Pang Yuzhong snorted and said, "Junior brother, I'm here for this person. If this person is dead, then I'll let it go. If he's still alive, I'll capture his soul and place it on the altar so that he can suffer for eternity." Guomingda said, "Hong'an, lead the way and bring us to the mountain to observe the formation." Hong'an bowed and said, "Yes, please follow me, spiritual masters." At the peak of the Turtle Snake Mountain, Zhang Yan had been sitting here for 28 years. All these years, he had absorbed no less than 1,000 pieces of azure yang energy jade to nourish his inner core. His first-grade golden core was like a bottomless pit. No matter how much chi of essence came, it would be swallowed up. Now, he had refined another piece of azure yang energy jade into a pile of gray powder. He opened his eyes and was about to use the fish drum to take down the azure yang energy jade. However, at this moment, the golden core in his abdomen suddenly trembled. Following that, all the acupoints in his body also moved. His eyes narrowed and he quickly sat down. He didn't dare to move recklessly. This was a sign that the chi of essence had been absorbed to the extreme and was about to transform. He could faintly feel that the time to form a nascent soul had arrived. He calmed his mind and slowly breathed out. He didn't disturb the changes and let nature take its course. After a while, he suddenly felt a force stirring within his body. At first, it was so subtle that it was almost undetectable. Then, it flowed like a stream. Then, it grew stronger and stronger, larger and larger. It was like a surging river, the power of 100 rivers converging into the sea. When the force reached its peak, his body trembled and he felt an irresistible force bursting out of his body. His mind was bombarded and the golden core in his abdomen was shattered. A deafening explosion resounded throughout the entire Kun Island. A gust of clear chi rose from the bottom of his body and rushed to the top of his head. It was so powerful that it actually smashed a hole in the extreme heavenly gang chi. The clear chi rushed to the extreme heaven and traveled 100 miles. Just now, it stopped. Then, it trembled and spread out. In the endless light, a 10 feet tall Yuanying golden body appeared. This Yuanying golden body stood in the void, stepping on auspicious clouds. Its body was bathed in 100 feet golden light. 5-colored chi rotated and rotated behind its back. It was dazzling and overflowing with auspicious colors. There were also hundreds of spiritual lights revolving around its body. It was like fireflies dancing in the sky. As soon as the Yuanying appeared, the peak of the Turtle Snake Mountain was illuminated by a golden light. Half of the sky was illuminated. Thousands of rays of light shone on the mountains. The light was as bright as the sun. The momentum was immeasurable. Even from thousands of miles away, one could see the rainbow light up the sky on Kun Island. Such a big scene, even Guomingda and Pang Yuzhong, the two Jinren, looked at each other in shock. They couldn't help but stop in their tracks. At this moment, Zhang Yan only felt that the mana in his body had increased. It was as if a single movement of his hands and feet could perform a magnificent power. With a thought, the Yuanying golden body raised its hand and pointed. With a loud bang, a purple ray of lightning fell from the extreme heaven and landed on the Turtle Snake Mountain. It penetrated through 27 formations. The remaining force didn't decrease. It went out of the formation and went 100 feet away. Just now, it slowly dispersed. Zhang Yan smiled and stood up. He chanted, Yin and Yang Qi are involved in life. The primordial Qi is hidden in the chest. The 5 elements are performed. The spirit climbs the mountain ridge. The heavenly pillar is refined. The sound of the sword is heard in the clouds. It sweeps away the evil and purifies the Qi. The heart is like a dragon and tiger. The sea and the river are turned green. He collected the surging inner Qi one by one. Then, the clear Qi on the top of the door fell. The Yuanying golden body returned to his body. He rolled up his sleeves and kept the strange stone on the mountain peak. Then, he took a step outside and moved 1,000 feet away. In the blink of an eye, he was at the foot of the mountain. Carrot, 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 carrot. Chapter 443. As soon as the formation on the Turtle Snake Mountain was broken, Guojing and Pang, 2 people, rode the wind up the mountain. Suddenly they saw a Taoist with his 2 sleeves swaying. He was singing a song. Above his head was a cloud of clear air, behind his back there was a 5-colored light. It was extraordinary. The 2 people were surprised. Pang Yuzhong looked at the top of the mountain and saw that it was empty. His expression changed and he whispered, Senior Marshal Brother, this is bad. I'm afraid the treasures in the mountain have been taken by this person. Pang Mingda also frowned. They came here for this treasure. This treasure was related to the rise and fall of Lai Xian's sect, so they couldn't afford to lose it. However, they didn't expect that someone would come and steal it just as they were about to get their hands on it. However, when he thought about the aura he displayed when he was at the nascent soul stage, he was sure to be someone with an unparalleled foundation for such a shocking phenomenon to appear. Perhaps he had some unknown tricks up his sleeves. If they were to fight, even if he could defeat this person, he might not be able to come out unscathed. Thus, if he could avoid fighting, then it was best not to. Guomingda waved his horsetail whisk and went forward. He bowed and said, Fellow Taoist, please wait. Zhang Yan smiled faintly and returned the greeting. Fellow Taoists, why did you call me here? What can I do for you? When Zhang Yan was in the distance earlier, Pang Yuzhong had already recognized his appearance. It was precisely the person who had raped his disciple. However, compared to his disciple, the matter of the treasure was more important, so he could only put it aside for the time being and ask, Did fellow Taoist take the treasure in the mountain? Zhang Yan's expression didn't change. He admitted, If it is as you said, it is the strange stone on the mountain. That's right, I took it. Pang Mingda said in a deep voice, I know you are from the East Flower Continent. The treasure in the mountain belongs to the Lai Xian sect in the Middle Pillar Continent. If you take it, it might be inappropriate. I hope you can keep it. Otherwise, it won't be good if there is a misunderstanding. Zhang Yan heard this and laughed. He laughed and waved his sleeves, shouting, Let's not talk about what this is. Even if it's a rare treasure, it should belong to the vast Qingdao Palace. How did it become an item of your Lai Xian sect? Pang Yuzhong sneered. He turned around and said, Hong'an, come up. Hong'an walked forward anxiously. He had never expected that in the past 28 years, he would not be able to keep his promise. Not only did Zhang Yan not leave, but he was also yuanying in this place. When he looked over, his eyes were filled with shock and fear. He didn't even dare to speak loudly. He said, What orders do the 2 spiritual masters have? Pang Yuzhong pointed at Hong'an. He said loudly, This is Hong'an, a disciple of the vast Qingdao Palace. He is willing to offer this treasure to my sect, so it belongs to my sect. Zhang Yan raised his brows and asked, "Where is Duanmu Mian, the head of the Haoxing Palace?" Pang Yuzhong snorted and said coldly, "Duanmu Mian is old and muddle-headed. How dare he try to go against the Lai Xian sect? What a joke. He overestimated himself. Now, the person in charge of the vast path temple is Hong'an." His words contained a hint of threat, implying that he wanted to make things difficult for them. That would be the end result. Zhang Yan didn't care and said plainly, "That's not necessarily true. There's another person besides Hong'an. He can also decide who this treasure belongs to." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already standing in front of the young woman who had captured Lu Gua. Seeing a Yuanying spiritual master suddenly appear in front of her, the girl couldn't help but turn pale. The disciples standing nearby were even more frightened and instinctively wanted to take out their Dharma treasures. Gua and Pang Yuzhong were shocked and said at the same time, "No." They knew very well that if these disciples offended a Yuanying cultivator, no matter how many of them there were, they would be killed. Zhang Yan coldly snorted and waved his sleeve. Before the disciple could do anything, he was swept away by a gust of astral wind, leaving only Lu Gua in place. Zhang Yan raised his hand and brushed it over her body, removing the seal on her head. Just now, Lu Gua had already woken up and heard clearly what Zhang Yan, Gua, and Pang Yuzhong said. However, she couldn't make a sound because her inner qi was restrained. Now that she was free, she jumped up and bowed to Zhang Yan. She said gratefully, "Thank you for saving me, fellow Taoist." Then, he pointed at Hong'an and scolded, "Hong'an, how dare you call yourself a disciple of the vast Qingdao temple? You colluded with outsiders and plotted to kill your master. Our vast Qingdao palace doesn't have disciples like you who betray their masters and destroy their ancestors." Hong'an was humiliated by his scolding, but Lu Guo was standing beside Zhang Yan. Even Gua and Pang Yuzhong weren't in a hurry to make a move, so Hong'an could only swallow his anger for the time being. Zhang Yan glanced at Lu Gua and said slowly, "Fellow Taoist Lu, don't be impatient. I know that fellow Taoist Duanmu and Pang Yuzhong were killed, but if you promise to give me this treasure, I'm willing to avenge them for you." Just now, when he was breaking the formation, he had already sensed some clues about this treasure. If his guess was correct, then he was determined to get this treasure and wouldn't allow anyone else to lay their hands on it. If it was before, Lu Guo might have hesitated, but now, his mind was filled with thoughts of revenge. He said without thinking, "If you can avenge eldest senior brother, I'm willing to give you this treasure. I won't go back on my word." Guomingda's face darkened. "Fellow Taoist, are you sure you want to make things difficult for us?" Pang Yuzhong sneered and said, "Senior brother, why are you still talking to him? Today's matter won't end peacefully. Let's just do it." As soon as he finished speaking, he snorted, and the Yuanying leaped out from the top of the door. This Yuanying was covered in a thin layer of golden dust and emitted auspicious light that reflected dozens of feet away. Above the top of the door, there was also a cloud of stellar energy that hovered with specks of fine sand, like flying stars in a furnace. Guomingda waved his horsetail whisk, and a bright light flashed in his eyes. With a shout, smoke and fire burst out, and thousands of lights and shadows appeared. The Yuanying also came out, holding a smoke net in each hand. One was dark and gloomy, and the other was white like snow accumulated in a pile of frost. However, it was different from Pang Yuzhong. Above the top of the door, there were two balls of stellar energy, one on the left and one on the right. One was 3 feet big, like 1,000 snowy peaks, condensed and real. The other was sparse and thin, like a cloud of mist, its shape constantly changing. Zhang Yan laughed and took a step forward. There was a loud sound, and clear air dispersed. Golden flames rose, and the Yuanying suddenly came out, riding on the wind and clouds. There was the sound of mountains and seas, and a crystal rainbow surrounded its body. Its body was bathed in 5 rays of light, and it shot out thousands of feet. Its face couldn't be looked at directly. As soon as they released the Yuanying, the color of the heaven and earth changed immediately. Dark clouds fell, and the mountain rain was coming. The thousands of disciples of the Lai Xian sect were forced by the raging hurricane to the point that they couldn't stand still. They had no choice but to retreat a few miles away. Just now, they were at ease. A few feet above the heads of the three, there was stellar energy hovering. This qi was called cloud on the top. When a cultivator achieved yuanying, one would grow. If it was refined by the extreme heavenly stellar energy, it would be able to resist thunder, fire, and poisonous wind. Not only could it be used to refine treasures, it could also be used to counter enemies. When there were 3 yang clouds, one would be able to enter the second level of yuanying. When a cultivator faced an enemy, they would often use this to determine the depth of their opponent's cultivation. Zhang Yan and Pang Yuzhong took the lead. There was only one stellar cloud circling around, and that Guomingda had already refined 2 stellar clouds. One of them even turned from illusion to reality, turning yin into yang. It was obvious that his cultivation was deep and not to be underestimated. However, when cultivators fought, they didn't only look at one's cultivation, but even more so at one's magical abilities. There were very few techniques in the world that possessed both cultivation and magical abilities, and the Great Mystery 5 Elements True technique that Zhang Yan deduced just so happened to be one of them. As soon as he attained the nascent soul realm, he had the confidence to fight 2 cultivators of the same generation. After Zhang Yan started yuanying, he thought that the 2 of them would definitely attack, so he wanted to be prepared and fight back. However, he saw that the 2 of them didn't make a move, and instead chose to be on the defensive. He felt a little weird, thinking to himself that when the 2 of them fought, did they talk about the path of a gentleman? How would he know that the Central Pillar State wasn't like the East Flower State where monsters and demons gathered? Moreover, there weren't many sections. When disciples went out, they rarely fought with others. Although the Xian sect and Zhenluo alliance had fought each other for 20 years, the yuanying cultivators rarely showed their faces. However, nascent soul cultivators rarely showed their faces. Even if they did, they would avoid each other if their numbers were equal. Only when they had an absolute advantage would they attack together. Although Guomingda and Pang Yuzhong were yuanying cultivators, they had never fought to the death with cultivators of the same generation. They also weren't sure of Zhang Yan's methods, so they were on guard. They didn't want to win, but they didn't want to make any mistakes. Seeing that the 2 of them were being so careful, how could Zhang Yan be polite? He shouted and yuanying looked down from above. He raised his finger and a ball of lightning fell down towards Pang Yuzhong. After reaching the nascent soul realm, a cultivator's attacks would no longer be restricted to the shape of the fiendish smoke. Every move they made would contain great power. This heavenly lightning was the accumulation of Zhang Yan's own magic power. If a person's magic power was vast and boundless, just one bolt of lightning would be enough to defeat the enemy. Pang Yuzhong saw that the lightning was rumbling and was coming at him fiercely. He didn't dare to be careless, and with a low shout, he summoned his protective treasure light. A clear light rose from his feet and protected the surrounding 10 feet. When the lightning hit it, there was a loud bang and the treasure light shook non-stop. Pang Yuzhong made up his mind and squeezed the jade tablet in his hand. He secretly shook his hand and sent it straight towards Zhang Yan. This object was dark and gloomy, it flew out without a sound, it was extremely sinister. He originally wanted to deal with Zhang Yan the same way he dealt with Duanmu Mian, but he didn't expect that the sound of water would be so loud. The jade tablet didn't fly far before a blue light flashed past and disappeared, the connection between him and Zhang Yan's mind was cut off. He was shocked, but his reaction wasn't slow. He immediately took out another treasure from his sleeve. It was a golden bell the size of a fist. It was gilded with gold and hot silver, with auspicious patterns like dragons and phoenixes. He waved his hand and threw it into the air. He made a hand sign and was about to shake it when he saw a yellow light flash past and hit the bell. Kacha! The bell was smashed into pieces. Pang Yuzhong was shocked and was about to take out another treasure when he saw the blue light rushing towards him. It collided with the protective treasure light and caused it to shake violently, almost dispersing. He was shocked and didn't care about making another move. He quickly used his strength to try to stabilize it. But right at this moment, the boundlessly thick yellow light descended once more, and it was like heavenly lightning striking down. Rumble. The treasured light was dispersed, and the aftershock didn't reduce in the slightest. It shook him on the cloud and caused him to somersault, causing him to feel dizzy and unable to stand up. Zhang Yan's attack was like a rainbow, it was fierce. In just one move, Pang Yuzhong couldn't fight back. Guomingda saw that the situation wasn't good and didn't dare to sit still. He raised his hand and took out the black net. A black light flew out and in a blink of an eye, it arrived above Zhang Yan's Yuanying. The speed of its movement was incomparably fast. This treasure is called Bei Qi Net. Once it covers a cultivator, it can restrain their mana and trap them like a net. When fighting an enemy, it has never failed. Who would have thought that when this treasure came over, Zhang Yan didn't even pay attention to it. He waved his sleeve and suddenly a bright golden light flew out from Yuanying's back. It was about 100 zhang long and as thin as a gossamer, it was hard to see with the naked eye. It only flashed once, circled around, and then disappeared. Guomingda's Bei Qi Net had already released a stream of air and covered Zhang Yan. He was delighted and felt that there was no suspense in taking this person down. He said, "Shitty, wait a moment and watch me take this person down." But after saying a few words, he didn't get a response. He couldn't help but look over in surprise, only to see Pang Yuzhong standing there in a daze, not moving at all. He suddenly felt that something was wrong and was about to ask again when he heard a loud cry. The upper half of Pang Yuzhong's body was actually cut off from his chest, splitting into two and falling down the cloud. Chapter 444. Please remember this website's domain name. Guomingda saw that his shitty was suddenly defeated and died, and even his spirit was nowhere to be seen. Because he couldn't figure out what method Zhang Yan used, he couldn't help but panic. But he thought that his Bei Qi Luo had already restrained Zhang Yan, so he wouldn't retreat. He clenched his teeth and chanted the incantation. The black Luo's stream of air was like a bell. Following his incantation, it suddenly shrunk and closed in. Zhang Yan felt a huge force wrapping around him, as if it wanted to bind him and Yuanying together. He didn't panic, he laughed coldly and shook his shoulder. A green light rose from the Yuanying, blocking the Luo. The green light expanded, like a branch, it grew continuously, and a crackling sound could be heard. In just a moment, it actually pushed open a gap in the Bei Qi Luo, preventing it from closing. When Guomingda saw this, he was also shocked. If he allowed him to push away this magical weapon, then the advantage he had would be wiped away. How would he dare to let him escape? He hurriedly used his incantation and incessantly activated his mana. The Beifeng Luo trembled continuously and the airflow continued to drop down, one by one stretching out. The black fog covered the clouds and as soon as it was swept away, it continuously entangled with the inside. Zhang Yan saw that the pressure on his body suddenly increased, he wanted to use the wood elemental true light to push it away. But just as he was about to use his strength, his heart moved, he thought for a moment and retracted some of his strength. He only blocked it and didn't allow it to close in, but he also didn't struggle out. As a result, this battle became a battle of mana. Pang Mingda wasn't anxious at first, and even the situation before him was quite satisfactory. Facing the enemy, it was obvious that Zhang Yan's skills were better. But in his mind, this person was just now in the nascent soul stage, his skills were definitely not as deep as his own. After a long time, he would naturally be able to turn the situation around and easily gain the upper hand. But as time passed, he gradually felt that something was wrong. Zhang Yan was still calm and collected, not showing any signs of declining, but he felt short of breath and weak, somewhat unable to hold on. Of course, it was possible that Zhang Yan was deliberately mystifying things, but he didn't dare to gamble with his life. In particular, Zhang Yan was a cultivator from a major sect in the Donghua continent. He had often heard that the cultivators of this continent were powerful, which made him think even more highly of them. He could not help but feel nervous. If his spiritual power was really not as deep as this person's, then wouldn't he be in danger if he continued? This was also because the middle pillar state's cultivators lacked experience and their Tao hearts were not strong enough. They usually relied on external objects to obtain victory. If they were unable to take down their opponent even with a magic treasure, they would lose their confidence and be beaten back to their original state in an instant. They would be at a loss of what to do and no longer have confidence. If the top 10 disciples of Qinsung school were here, even if they lost all their magic treasures, they still dared to fight to the death. Another long time passed. The two were still in a stalemate. Pang Mingda already felt mentally and physically exhausted, and his spiritual power was severely depleted. Seeing that it was difficult to continue, he was also afraid and secretly complained, "Are all the cultivators of the Donghua continent this powerful? This person clearly only reached the nascent soul stage not long ago, how is he so powerful?" He thought that if this continued, he would probably end up like his junior brother Pang Yuzhong. He could not help but feel anxious. He took out a few pills from his sleeve, but after swallowing them, he found that they could only hold on for a short while. The spiritual power of the Yuanying cultivators was immense. They fed on the essence of heaven and earth, and when fighting with others, they were constantly being depleted. The power of the pills was like a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. It could slightly replenish some spiritual energy, but it was impossible to use it to turn the situation around. The disciples watching the battle on both sides saw that he had already started to swallow the pills, and it was obvious that he was at a disadvantage. They were also anxious and wanted to go up and help. However, when the Yuanying cultivators fought, there were astral winds swirling on both sides. Those with lower cultivation were pushed away when they got a little closer, let alone go up and help. At this moment, no one realized that when Pang Yuzhong was killed, Hongan had retreated far away and sneaked into a corner where no one could see him. Then, regardless of the situation of the battle, he fled toward the outside of Kunyu without looking back. Not long after, he left the array and disappeared without a trace. When Guomingda came out, he wanted to leave quickly and return quickly. He did not think that he would stay outside for long, so he did not bring many pills with him. Not long after, he consumed all of them. After thinking about it, he made up his mind and shook his body. A thunderous sound was heard, and a cloud was shaken off from the top of the Yuanying. It slowly floated down, and when it touched his skin, it turned into essence and entered his body. This was the essence of his spiritual power, and it was tempered by astral winds, so it was extraordinary. With its nourishment, his originally depleted spiritual power was replenished. Guomingda's face turned pale, and then it turned red again. This cloud was broken, and he lost at least 100 years of cultivation. Although the middle pillar state was a place with a lot of spiritual resources, and he could cultivate it back in the future, he knew that with his lifespan, he would not be able to step into the second stage of Yuanying. Even though he was able to harden his heart ached endlessly as well. He could only ceaselessly console himself. So long as he captured this person before him and seized the treasure back, when he returned to the sect, who else would be able to compare to his contributions? He would definitely be able to enjoy a lot of offerings. Different from the confused Guomingda, since the beginning of the fight, Zhang Yan was not in a hurry. He wanted to capture this person alive and interrogate him to solve a few doubts in his heart. This was to take the opportunity to consume the opponent's spiritual power, so that it would be easier to capture him later. Before he made his move, he had already thought that if this person's cultivation was deep, or if he had some powerful trump card, then he would use the purple heaven thunder to open the way, and he would be able to escape unscathed. After a round of fighting, he was no longer afraid. Although this person's cultivation level was higher than his spiritual power was far from his. Even if the opponent cut off the cloud on top of his head, he would only be able to hold on for a little longer, and it was far from the point where he could turn defeat into victory. After a few hours, the sky darkened, and it was already night. Guomingda's expression was slightly tired, and there was some panic in his eyes. In his heart, he actually wanted to retreat. Actually, with the help of the cloud, his spiritual power was still far from reaching the point where he could not hold on any longer. At least he would have to fight for another night, and just now it was possible to see the outcome. Although he was Yuanying Jinren, he was able to reach this stage because of the various magical treasures and the secret techniques of the sect. His mind and spirit were far from the tenacity of a cultivator like Zhang Yan, who relied purely on himself to fight. Before he fought with Zhang Yan, he had never fought for more than an hour. At this moment, his body and mind were already very tired. It was rare for him to hold on until now. Moreover, Zhang Yan's calm and composed look gave him a great deal of pressure. His heart was heavy, and he was somewhat out of breath. Seeing that things could not be done, he thought of escaping again. He thought to himself, even if I obtain this treasure, it is not something I can use myself. I still have to hand it over to the sect. Why should I risk my life to fight? There are many disciples here that need my protection. Now that junior brother is gone, if I lose, where can they escape to? Magical treasures can be refined again, but a dead person cannot be resurrected. Why not take advantage of the fact that I still have some strength left, and temporarily stop? In the future, when I call a few fellow sect members with high cultivation levels, I will find trouble with this person. He originally did not have the thought of the great Tao in his heart. He only wanted to live freely for hundreds or thousands of years, and enjoy the riches and honor of the world. Now that he had not lived enough, how could he bear to throw away his life? Once these thoughts appeared, he no longer had the heart to continue fighting, and only thought about how to escape. But even though he rarely fought with others, he knew that if he wanted to escape, he could not weaken his momentum. Instead, he had to suppress his opponent. Otherwise, if the opponent really counterattacked, it would really be difficult to resist. Therefore, he did not retreat but advanced instead. He gathered all the strength in his body and urged it repeatedly. The sorrowful Qi Luo suddenly increased in momentum. The black fog rolled, and it seemed like it was going to crush Zhang Yan in one fell swoop. The surrounding disciples' spirits were lifted, and their eyes lit up. Since Zhang Yan entered the path of Tao, he had encountered many cunning enemies. He had rich experience in fighting formations. Just from the opponent's small movements, he could see some clues. With a turn of his mind, he could guess what the opponent was thinking at this moment. He smiled and simply pushed the boat with the current. He purposely withdrew some of his mana. On the surface, it looked like he was being suppressed. Guomingda saw that his strategy was successful and couldn't help but be overjoyed. Just that at this moment, a moment of hesitation and doubt appeared in his heart. He only exerted a little pressure and this person seemed to be unable to hold on. If that was the case, could it be that this person was actually at the point where he was at the end of his rope? That expression on his face was just an act. Actually, if he exerted a little more, he would be able to take this person down. Once this thought appeared, he was not in a hurry to leave. Instead, he wanted to wait for a while and see the result. But he didn't know that this just happened to be within Zhang Yan's calculations. After a moment, Guomingda was shocked to find that not only was he unable to suppress the opponent, the battle situation was instead gradually returning to the original state. He had wasted a lot of mana for nothing. His original plan was not successful. He immediately realized that he had been tricked. This time he didn't have any thoughts of defeating the enemy, and once again activated his Fa Li, waiting for the Bei Qi Luo to show a little bit of power. He covered his head with the white smoke in his hand, creating a clear cloud light, bright as if it had been washed, glistening with blue water. After covering his body, he put away his yuanying, turned around and was about to leave. A cold smile appeared on Zhang Yan's face. He no longer suppressed the wood element true light. He released the restraint and allowed his mana to skyrocket. That green light qi immediately crept up and grew higher and higher. In an instant, that Bei Qi Luo exploded. Another flash of blue light swept that magical weapon away. Guomingda only felt a pain in his heart. Then a feeling of emptiness hit him. A salty taste surged up his throat. He didn't need to look back to know that his magical weapon was broken. At this moment, he couldn't care less about the 1,000 over disciples. He only cared about himself and ran out. A ray of light flew out. Zhang Yan laughed heartily and stretched out his nascent soul, which transformed into a 300-meter-long hand that chased after Guomingda and his treasures. Zhang Yan's nascent soul laughed heartily and stretched out its hand. Guomingda was extremely shocked, and he hurriedly circulated his magic power. The protective smoky net shone brightly, and mist rose up to firmly resist the big hand. But since he was in Zhang Yan's hand, he was like a cornered beast. The huge hand kept on squeezing. In just a moment, Guomingda's mana was exhausted. An explosion was heard. The white smoke dispersed. His vision turned black and he lost consciousness. For the latest and fastest chapters, please log in. Reading is a pleasure. I suggest you keep it. Chapter 445. When Zhang Yan captured Guomingda, there was a commotion among the disciples who were watching from afar. Everyone was panic-stricken. In just a few hours, 2 of their masters had been defeated. How could they fight against him? The key was that Guomingda only cared about escaping just now and didn't have the time to check, so he didn't realize that Hong'an had already slipped away and was no longer here. Without him leading the way, it was impossible for them to leave the Kunyu Grand Formation safely unless they knew how to break the formation. When the thousands of disciples realized this, their hearts were filled with despair. Zhang Yan only needed a glance to know what had happened. Since he knew they couldn't escape, he didn't care about them. He just took the unconscious Guomingda and threw him at Lu Guo's feet, saying, "Fellow Taoist Lu, you can do whatever you want with this person. If you don't want to do it yourself, I can do it for you. But before that, can I ask a few questions?" Lu Guo looked at the unconscious Guomingda at his feet and knew that there was hope for revenge. He raised his head and looked at Zhang Yan with gratitude. His lips moved, and he cupped his hands, saying, "Fellow Taoist Zhang." Halfway through his sentence, he suddenly felt that it was inappropriate and quickly changed his words, "Taoist Zhang, if you want to ask something, just ask it first." Zhang Yan smiled and nodded. He flicked his finger and a stream of fresh air entered Guomingda's nose. After a while, Guomingda slowly woke up. When he saw the situation in front of him and saw Lu Guo's hate-filled eyes, he couldn't help but let out a long sigh. Zhang Yan didn't avoid Lu Guo. He went straight to the point and said, "Fellow Taoist Guo, if you don't want to suffer, then tell me in detail what you know about the rare treasure. Otherwise, I will have many ways to torture you." Guomingda smiled bitterly and said, "I am meat on the chopping block. Since my life is in the hands of the 2 of you, please speak clearly. I will tell you everything I know." Zhang Yan said in a deep voice, "I want to ask. What exactly is that treasure on the Turtle Snake Mountain?" Guomingda revealed a slightly surprised expression. He originally thought that Zhang Yan should have known what this treasure was. Otherwise, why would he fight with the 2 of them for this treasure? Moreover, Lu Guo was right next to him. Why didn't the main character ask him instead of asking him? In fact, although Lu Guo was the 3rd master of the Haoxing Palace, she was simple-minded and unworldly. Duanmu Mian and Hong'an were afraid that he would inadvertently leak the information, so they did not tell him the truth. What he knew was roughly the same as what he told Zhang Yan later. Zhang Yan didn't believe Duanmu Mian and Lu Guo's words either. When he was talking to Lu Guo earlier, he already had the intention to test her. He already knew that she didn't understand the real situation. Later, when he saw the treasure, he made some guesses. However, he wasn't completely sure, which was why he asked this question. Guomingda was silent for a while. Just now said slowly, "I only know that this is an ancient divine beast's egg. As for the specifics, I don't know." Lu Guo finally understood the truth. He was stunned for a while, then he went into a trance and muttered something to himself. Suddenly, he raised his head and pointed at Guomingda angrily, "I see. No wonder your Lai Xian sect wants to snatch this item." Guomingda sighed and said, "Taoist Lu, I'm sorry." He said, "Fellow Lu, I'm sorry. Although my Lai Xian sect has been around for more than 500 years, it seems like a long time. In fact, compared to those sects that have been around for thousands of years, our foundation is shallow. When the Shaoqing sect comes to attack us again, most of the time, we will disperse. However, if there is a divine beast protecting the sect, not only can we defend against external enemies, but we can also stabilize fate. I was entrusted by the sect to do this for the hundreds of thousands of sect members. Zhang Yan listened and nodded his head slightly. What he said was not far from what he had guessed. However, he was familiar with the scriptures and came from the Qinsang school, a sect that had been around for thousands of years. Regardless of knowledge, Guomingda couldn't be compared to him. In his heart, there was actually another conclusion. Then, he asked a few more questions about the Lai Xian sect. Guomingda didn't hide anything and told him everything. In fact, he didn't think that what Zhang Yan asked was any secret. Even if it was the sect's Taoist books, if Zhang Yan asked, he would still tell him. In the cultivation of Tao in the Central Pillar continent, techniques were secondary. Only external objects were fundamental. These were firmly controlled by the three major sections. No matter how high one's aptitude was, no matter how good one's comprehension was, if one didn't cultivate external objects, one wouldn't be able to achieve anything. Only those who came from the major clans had the qualifications to cultivate to the upper realm. In the royal family of the Song country, there were many disciples of the royal family who entered the sect. It could be said that the power of the secular world in this continent and the cultivation sects were inseparable and merged into one. As for the Zhen-Luo alliance, it was originally a loose alliance formed by the cultivators of the various continents who were unwilling to be restricted by others. They didn't open their doors to accept disciples. Even if they obtained external objects, they would use them for their own use. The people in this alliance mostly thought for their own family. Because of this, although they had a lot of people, they were still no match for the Lai Xian sect. After Zhang Yan found out everything he wanted to know, he took a step back and said to Lu Guo, "Fellow cultivator Lu, I have finished my questions. If you want to take revenge, you can start now." Lu Guo took a deep breath and walked forward. Seeing the hatred in her eyes, Guomingda knew that he wouldn't be able to escape. His face turned pale and he sighed softly. He closed his eyes and waited for death. Lu Guo snorted and raised her hand. Just as he was about to make his move, he heard a pleasant voice say, "Taoist Lu, please stay your hand." He turned around and realized that the one who spoke was the girl who said that she wanted to turn him into a strong man. The girl came forward and bowed. She said seriously, "Taoist Lu, before you make your move, can you listen to me for a moment?" Lu Guo didn't want to listen, but he was kind by nature. He stood still and said stiffly, "Speak." The girl bowed to him again and said, "Taoist Lu, you also know that Pingdong is divided into 3 parts. The Lai Xian sect has one of them. My name is Bai Ran. My Bai family is a big clan in the southeast. We have a few words in the sect. If you are willing to let my master go, I am willing to offer all the treasures in the clan for you to enjoy." Lu Guo snorted and said angrily, "The revenge of killing my brother is absolutely irreconcilable. There is no room for discussion. Don't talk anymore. I will not let this old thief go. I don't want your things. Go away, I am going to make my move." Bai Ran took 2 steps forward and stood closer to Lu Guo. She said softly, "Why is Taoist brother so stubborn? The dead are already dead. Even if you take revenge for him, can you bring him back to life? Moreover, Taoist brother killed my master. How can you escape the revenge of the Lai Xian sect? Why do you have to sacrifice your life for this? My daughter is willing to use the power of the clan to help Taoist brother cultivate. Isn't this good?" Lu Guo said stubbornly, "I don't care. Moreover, who knows if what you said is true or false? Go away, go away." As she said this, she was already waving her hand to chase her away. Bai Ran bit her lips and said softly, "If Taoist brother is afraid that I will go back on my words, I am willing to serve you with my body. I will always be by your side and swear a curse. What do you think?" As soon as she said this, she leaned forward and gently pressed her soft and delicate body against Lu Guo's. In an instant, her already pretty face blushed, making her look even more beautiful. Lu Guo had cultivated for more than 300 years and had never taken a step out of Kunyu. Moreover, she had never encountered such a situation. She was immediately dumbfounded. She pushed by Ran with both hands and took a few steps back. Her face was flushed and she couldn't say a word. Zhang Yan looked on indifferently from the side and didn't say anything to disturb her. He captured this person just for the divine beast egg. As long as Lu Guo fulfilled his promise, he would let her make her own decision. Even if he couldn't resist the temptation and released Guomingda, he would let him make his own decision. He wouldn't stop her. After a while, Lu Guo's emotions calmed down. He was a cultivator after all and had already regained his composure. He said in a deep voice, "Lady Bai, go away. Brother treats me like a father. If I don't take revenge, how can I be a human? No matter what you say, the result will be the same. Don't waste your breath." After saying this, he suddenly turned around and decisively took action. With just a wave of his sleeve, a wisp of smoke flew out and hit Guomingda's forehead. With a "poochie" sound, it pierced through Guomingda's skull. With another wave of his sleeve, Bai Ran covered her mouth and screamed in shock. Guomingda's primordial spirit was destroyed. This person no longer existed in this world. After doing all this, Lu Guo let out a long sigh. With a face full of tears, he said to Tian Yan, "Eldest senior brother, I have taken revenge for you. Unfortunately, that despicable Hongan has escaped. But don't worry, no matter where he runs to, even if he has to search the 9 continents, I will definitely take his head back and place it in front of the ancestral tablets." Zhang Yan looked at him and slowly walked in front of him. He smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Lu, I took the treasure from your temple without permission. I hope you don't hold a grudge against me." Lu Guo turned around, cupped her hands, and bowed deeply to Zhang Yan. She sighed and said, "Zhenren Zhang, I also understand that if this treasure was placed in a small path, it would be impossible to protect it. Eldest senior brother's cultivation was more than 10 times higher than mine, but didn't he still lose his life? We have been here for more than 300 years, but we still couldn't break the formation. Once Taoist Zhang arrived, he obtained this treasure. It can be seen that this item is fated with Taoist Zhang. Now that Taoist Zhang has taken revenge for me, according to what you said earlier, this item should belong to Taoist Zhang. Why would I hold a grudge against you?" Zhang Yan nodded and praised, "Fellow Taoist Lu is indeed a man of his word." The reason why he spent so much effort was that he inexplicably felt that this divine beast's egg was very important. Whether he stole it openly or secretly, he was afraid that there would be great karma involved. However, as long as he fulfilled his promise and obtained the vast Xing Taoist palace disciples' promise to give it to him, there would be no more entanglements. From then on, it would belong to him, and he no longer had to worry about it. At this moment, Lu Guo bowed deeply and said, "Taoist Zhang, there is something that I don't know if I should say." Zhang Yan was in a good mood, so he smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist Zhang, there is something that I don't know if I should say." Lu Guo looked embarrassed. He pointed to the 1,000 disciples and said, "These people are here on orders from the sect. They are not unforgivable evildoers. The heavens have the virtue of cherishing life, so I have the intention to let them go. However, I am afraid that the Lai Xian sect will find out about this and implicate you, so I feel very uneasy." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Since fellow Taoist Lu has a kind heart, why would I be stingy to help you? As for implicating me, you are worrying too much. I destroyed a branch of the Lai Xian sect in the past, so I have already offended them. Just now that I have become a nascent soul, I am worried that I can't find an opponent to test my sword on. If they want to cause trouble for I, then just come. After achieving Yuanying, one could go to the extreme heaven and fly with the help of the astral winds. It was not difficult to travel tens of thousands of miles in a day. If one wanted to catch up, they would have to be Yuanying Jinren as well. However, those people from the Lai Xian sect had similar skills to him. If they were alone, they might not have the guts to seek revenge. As for those with profound skills, he also wanted to fight them. Since he had the flying starry palace, he was not afraid even if he was besieged. Lu Guo couldn't help but show envy in his eyes. At Zhang Yan's level of cultivation, other than the cultivators in the third stage of Yuanying and the people from the heavens abode, there were not many people who could do anything to him. He could really be said to be unrestrained and unrestrained. Chapter 446. Author's note: today, the thousands of Lai Xian sect's disciples were finally sent out of Kunyu by Lu Guo. With Zhang Yan, a great nascent soul cultivator, watching from the side, no one dared to have any wild thoughts. They all obediently retreated from this place, and then, as if they were escaping from a disaster, they flew towards the nearest branch of the Lai Xian sect. In these 20 years, the Lai Xian sect had built a few branches in Pingxi. Although the Zhen Luo League had retreated deep into the mountains, they did not lose much of their power. If they showed the slightest weakness, there was no guarantee that they would not return. Thus, every branch was carefully managed. This actually restrained half of Lai Xian sect's power from top to bottom. As a result, Ping Dong's base was much weaker. The Lai Xian sect would not maintain such a situation for long. Their main goal was to get the divine beast's egg. After obtaining it, they would pretend to be defeated and slowly withdraw all their forces back to Ping Dong. In this way, it would seem that they had suffered a great loss, but in fact, they had secretly obtained a divine beast that could suppress the destiny of others. However, when these thousands of disciples returned, they brought back a shocking news. 2 nascent soul cultivators were killed, and they were killed by a single person. Lai Xian sect sent a total of 5 Yuanying Jinren to Pingxi. In addition to the protection of the ancestral master's statue and tens of thousands of disciples, this was already an extremely powerful force. Although it was not enough to attack, it was more than enough to guard the branch. However, now that 2 people were gone, they were stretched thin. As Zhang Yan had expected, after knowing about this, the remaining 3 Jinren did not show any intention of finding trouble with him. Firstly, these people had killed 2 people, so Zhang Yan was wary of them. They did not have the confidence to win and were afraid that they would get themselves into trouble. Secondly, after the death of the 2 nascent soul cultivators, the strength of the Lai Xian sect in Pingxi had been greatly reduced. They believed that this situation would soon be discovered by the Zhen Luo Union, and it was hard to guarantee that they would not launch a large-scale counterattack. Right now, they could only take care of themselves. Therefore, other than sending a letter to the main altar to wait for a decision, they did not take any action. A month later, on the peak of Turtle Snake Mountain, Zhang Yan sat cross-legged with the divine beast egg placed in front of him. Divine beasts were born when they sensed the essence of heaven and earth. It was unknown how the Almighty Senior from the vast movement Dao Palace obtained this egg, but he placed it here because he wanted to absorb the essence of the sun, moon, and stars from the sky, as well as the Xianqing Qi, to give birth to a little spirit. However, this was only the first step. Now that the embryo had not formed, what exactly was the divine beast was actually uncertain. The central pillar continent was located in the middle of the 9 continents. None of the spirits of the 4 directions could gain the upper hand. Therefore, although it had sufficient vital energy, it was still not able to take form. It still needed to be brought to any direction in the north, south, east, west, or west. Only then would it be able to sense the stars above and receive the energy of the earth below. In other words, whether or not the divine beast's egg could be nurtured in the end and what kind of spirit it would give birth to completely depended on where Zhang Yan brought it down to. However, in the past month, when Zhang Yan used his heart to sense, he found that the egg was chaotic and empty. He couldn't help but frown. If this little bit of innate spirit had not been born, it would be useless even if he took it. He would need to absorb the essence of heaven and earth here and wait for the opportunity to come. No one knew if this wait would last for 1,000 or 10,000 years. Should he just give up? However, when he formed his nascent soul, he clearly felt a bit of spirituality resonating with him. Although this feeling was fleeting, he didn't ignore it. He pondered for a while and decided to try a few more times. If it really didn't work, he could only bring it back to his cave abode and think about other things. At this moment, he suddenly heard a clear and melodious sound from the foot of the mountain. When Zhang Yan heard it, he raised his eyebrows and said in a deep voice, "Is that Zhong Xian? Come up and talk." The little Taoist boy Zhong Xian came up the mountain path and saw Zhang Yan. He knelt down from afar and said, "Spiritual Master Zhang, Master requests an audience." Now that this little servant had lost his master, he was much more well-behaved. When Zhang Yan turned his eyes, Zhong Xian immediately lowered his head and didn't dare to look at him. After Duanmu Mian and Hong An left, Lu Guo took over the position of the Haoxing Palace's monastery master. Because this place was close to the extreme heaven, it was convenient for cultivation. Therefore, Zhang Yan stayed here to stabilize his cultivation. He pondered for a while and nodded, "Invite monastery master Lu up." Zhong Xian felt like he was pardoned and left in a panic. A short while later, the sound of footsteps could be heard. Lu Guo stepped forward and bowed to Zhang Yan. He seemed to want to say something, but his lips moved a little, but he stopped himself. Looking at his embarrassed expression, Zhang Yan couldn't help but laugh. "Taoist Lu, did you encounter something difficult?" Lu Guo stomped his feet and sighed. "These few days, there are many cultivators outside the mountain. From the looks of it, they seem to be from the Lai Xian order. This Kuan island is protected by a big formation. I'm not afraid, but I think that Hong An is also outside. If he attracts more people, it doesn't matter if I live or die, but if the sect is destroyed, it won't be enough to redeem myself." Zhang Yan looked at him with a faint smile and said, "Taoist Lu, do you want I to stay a little longer?" Lu Guo's face turned red. He did think so, but he was too embarrassed to say it directly. Now that Zhang Yan exposed him, he felt awkward and quickly explained, "Jinren Zhang, I just want to set up a formation in order to block the enemy. Even if Hong An comes, I'm not afraid. However, this will take a few months to set up. During this time, I'm afraid that the Lai Xian order will take the opportunity to attack, so I want Jinren to stay here. Jinren, don't worry, I won't trouble you for nothing." He hurriedly reached into his sleeve and took out a jade plate. He held it up with both hands and presented it to Zhang Yan. He said, "This is something that Duanmu Shixiang obtained many years ago. It's called the Vitality Protecting Evil Crystal. It was originally prepared by De Shixiang to restore his power. But before the time was right, he already..." At this point, he paused and shook his head, saying, "If Jinren agrees, I'm willing to offer this item." Vitality Evil Crystal. Zhang Yan was slightly surprised. This fiend crystal was a rare external object that was condensed from earth vein infernal qi. It was able to help nascent soul cultivators improve their cultivation, and its effects were very strange. Although he had heard of it before, because it was rare, he had never seen it before. At this moment, there were dozens of jade crystals neatly arranged on the jade plate in Lu Guo's hand. This vast Qing Taoist palace was only a remote small sect, but it could take out so many of them at once. It was obvious that the middle pillar state was rich in resources. He couldn't help but think that every year, the middle pillar state would send many such good items to the Shaoqing sect. It was equivalent to using the land of a continent to worship a sect. How could the Shaoqing sect not be strong? Zhang Yan originally wanted to stay here for a few more days. Since the treasure was in front of him, he didn't stand on ceremony and went with the flow, saying, "If that's the case, I will accept it." Lu Guo was relieved and happily cupped her hands, saying, "Thank you, Jinren Zhang." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Taoist Lu, I have to return to the sect eventually. In I's opinion, it's not appropriate for you to fight against the Lai Xian sect alone. Why don't you find someone else to help you?" Lu Guo was stunned for a moment and then sincerely asked, "Jinren Zhang, please show me the way." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "It's not really a way. You can go to the Zhen Luo League and you will definitely gain something." Lu Guo slapped his forehead and suddenly said, "That's right. The Zhen Luo League and the Lai Xian sect are enemies now. You can go there and ask for help. Thank you for reminding me, otherwise I wouldn't have thought of it." He had lived in Kunyu for more than 300 years. Whenever something happened, he would solve it on his own. He never thought of going outside the mountain to ask for help. Now that Zhang Yan understood, he immediately understood. After thanking him profusely, he left the mountain. As soon as Lu Guo left, Zhang Yan waved his hand and the dozens of vitality-protecting evil crystals flew up and floated in front of him. Each of them was the length of a finger and the thickness of a chopstick. There were strands of silver shavings circling around them like flying stars and fireflies. It was extremely beautiful. He thought for a moment and said, "There's no point in keeping this item. I might as well refine it now." Therefore, he didn't keep it. He waved his sleeve and a strong thunder flew out. With a crackling sound, it shattered the crystal on the spot and turned into countless sparkling dust that filled the mountain peak. He opened his mouth and sucked in like a whale sucking in water, absorbing all the stardust into his body. After that, he closed his eyes and adjusted his breathing for a moment. After 2 hours, the cloud above him trembled slightly. The cloud that was originally misty like a cloud seemed to have become slightly more solid, but when he silently observed it, there seemed to be no change. Zhang Yan also knew that when one reached the Yuanying realm, it wasn't something that could be done in a short period of time. Therefore, he didn't mind it. He collected his thoughts and calmed his mind. He once again looked at the chaotic embryo. This time, he didn't know if it was because of his luck or some other reason. Not long after, he suddenly felt a weak spiritual sense. He just touched it slightly and then it disappeared. He wanted to look for it again, but he couldn't feel it anymore. However, Zhang Yan's spirit was greatly lifted. At this moment, he could confirm that the embryo had given birth to a spirit. In this way, he didn't need to wait for thousands of years. However, what kind of divine beast he would nurture it into was still a matter of discussion. Zhang Yan calculated in his heart and finally made up his mind. Since it was obtained from the Tortoise Snake Mountain, and the Dark Azure sect was located in the north, above the great pool of Dragon Abyss, they could borrow the water from the north to nurture it, and they could also take care of it at the same time. In reality, if he wanted to shorten the time of nurturing, the best choice was to head to the northern darkness continent and find a suitable place. However, that was the place where the monsters resided. If Qinsung's school was at its peak, he didn't need to think too much. He just needed to go and no one from the 8 monster divisions would dare to come out. However, it was different now. Once he brought the embryo there, the monster division might sense it. That would be too dangerous and he might be surrounded and attacked. Zhang Yan thought about it. If his cultivation reached the elephant realm and he became a heaven-enlightened master, he could try to charge in. However, he could only take a step back. After he returned, he would place it in the clear nether sky lake. After a long time, he would be able to succeed. Thus, he waved his sleeves and put the embryo away. After this matter was done, he thought about it. There were still 11 years until the sword battle between the 16 sections. It seemed like a long time, but it was actually just a short moment. He wanted to use this period of time to cultivate a few more techniques so that he could fight against the heroes of the 16 sections. Especially the 5-element escape technique. Not only could it trap and block enemies, but it could also allow him to fly and hide. It would be a great help to him and he had to study it well. Although it wasn't easy to cultivate this technique, he had the Taishian 5-element true technique as his foundation and the broken jade. It could be said that the 2 biggest hurdles had been crossed and he didn't have to worry about it like other cultivators. Cultivating it wouldn't be too difficult. Chapter 447. Zhang Yan was already a Yuanying cultivator. It was still okay for him to cultivate his abilities, but his improvement in spiritual energy was slow. Only by heading to the extreme heaven to absorb the Gangying and train in Yuanying could he improve his cultivation. Thinking about this, he had a sudden urge. With a clear roar, he leaped up and turned into a beam of light. He broke through the extreme heaven and instantly arrived above the Gangfeng. He stood on it and looked around. The sky was wide and the sea was wide, the air was clear and bright, the sea of clouds was boundless, rolling and surging. It was boundless, it gave one a feeling of flying freely, even one's chest felt relaxed. He looked around and saw that there were still many Qingyang ganging that hadn't dissipated. They were floating around with the gang qi. With a thought, he raised his hand and waved. He sucked some of it up and tried to refine and absorb it. However, as soon as it entered his body, he felt an uncontrollable force rushing into his body. It was extremely uncomfortable and it took him a while to completely refine it. He nodded his head and thought to himself, as expected. Before this, he was confused. This Qingyang ganging was considered a high-grade ganging, so why didn't he see other Yuanying cultivators coming to find it? Now that he tried it out, he understood. The azure Yang Polaris came from beyond the heavens, and it contained extreme Yang Qi. Without the help of the heroic knot-fish drum, it would not be easy for ordinary nascent soul cultivators to absorb it, and they would need to slowly refine it. Rather than wasting time here, why not go to other places to find ganging? Even if the Yuanying cultivators got it, they would use it to refine pills and weapons. They rarely used it to cultivate, so of course they wouldn't purposely search for it. Zhang Yan spread his sleeves and sat on the cloud. Just as he was about to circulate his energy to cultivate, a thought suddenly surfaced in his mind. Before he left, the sect leader said that if he used the hero drum, it might attract the disciples of that person to find trouble with him. The sect leader wouldn't talk about this for no reason. Therefore, he remembered what the sect leader said. He was also very cautious in case the sect leader suddenly appeared and interrupted his cultivation. However, in the past 28 years, nothing out of the ordinary happened. This was a little unusual. The most likely explanation was that the central pillar state wasn't the territory of that fiend and his disciple. Due to the distance, they couldn't sense it. However, among the 9 continents, only the central pillar continent was the most suitable for recuperation. Moreover, it did not lack external materials for cultivation, nor did it have anyone with a high cultivation base. It could be said to be blessed by the heavens. It was like a barren land. Although he had hidden far away in the desolate wilderness, he did not know how long it would take for him to regain his original cultivation. Besides that, there was another possibility, and that was that the disciples of that ferocious man had noticed the existence of the heroic knot-fish drum. But for some reason, he didn't care. Thinking about it this way, it did make some sense. Ever since that fierce man was severely injured, he must still be in seclusion, and his disciple has lost his greatest backer. Perhaps they were still worried that Qinsang school would come to deal with them, so they did not dare to act rashly. This was also reasonable. However, Zhang Yan still did not dare to let his guard down. For the time being, it was the latter possibility. If the other party really intended to make a move, they would definitely not let him leave so easily. During those 28 years, when he was cultivating, Kun Island was just a few steps away. He could hide in the formation at any time to avoid the calamity. If it was him, he wouldn't be in a rush to make a move either. Instead, he would hide at the side and wait for the right opportunity. He thought that if there was such a strong enemy watching from the side, then he had to be careful. Especially since he knew nothing about his opponent. He couldn't be careless. Thus, with a single thought, he released the star's sword orb. With a twist of his technique, it turned into 8 rays of sword light and dispersed in all directions. It only stopped after traveling 1,000 feet away. This way, if there were any strange signs, he could warn them in advance and make preparations in advance. 600 miles away from Kun Island, there was a majestic Tsang Mountain. 2 people were sitting in an abandoned temple in the belly of the mountain, drinking with each other. One of them had blonde hair and golden eyebrows. He had a broad chest and a broad back. He was 6 feet tall and wore an apricot robe. A wine jar was held in his hand, and it looked as small as an ordinary cup. The person opposite him was about the same size as him. Behind his head was a clump of black hair that stood up like steel needles. However, his lips and teeth were protruding, and his face was ugly. At this moment, he kept pouring wine into his mouth. When he was drunk, he pulled down the front of his robe, revealing his chest full of black hair. He looked extremely ferocious. The man gulped down a few mouthfuls of wine, then shook his head and said, "Senior Marshal Brother Jean, it's a pity that the two of us can't go to such a rich place and miss out on many wonderful things. I heard that Junior Marshal's sister Dan is very happy. She has more than 100 fair-skinned and beautiful boys and girls in her backyard. I don't know what she does all day long." Senior Marshal Brother Jean heard the regret and envy in his voice. He laughed and said, "Junior Marshal Brother Zhao, among the three of us, only Junior Marshal's sister Shan looks like a human. She is also a Qi Dao cultivator. She can sneak into the Zhenluo alliance. If it were the two of us, we would know that she is a demon just by looking at her appearance. How could we do anything then?" Junior Marshal Brother Zhao threw the wine jar in his hand and suddenly howled to the sky, as if he was releasing the resentment in his heart. His voice rumbled and echoed throughout the valley. Senior Marshal Brother Jean didn't stop him. After venting his anger, Junior Marshal Brother Zhao just now stopped and said with hatred, "When we were under Demon Lord Luo, although we weren't his trusted subordinates, we had a comfortable life. We could do whatever we wanted, and when we were free, we could even catch 2 young girls to change our tastes. LV Junyang only entered the sect earlier than us, so what right does he have to control us? We can't do this, we can't do that, and we can only drink wine once a month. It's so depressing." Senior Marshal Brother Jin's expression changed and he shouted, "Junior Marshal Brother, shut up. Eldest Marshal Brother is not someone you can slander. If you want to die, don't drag me down with you." After being scolded by Senior Marshal Brother Jean, Junior Marshal Brother Zhao seemed to sober up a little. The words just now blurted out without much thought. Thinking about that person's methods, he broke out in a cold sweat. He looked to his left and right with a guilty conscience. He smiled embarrassedly and said, "Senior Marshal Brother Jean, it's a slip of the tongue." Senior Marshal Brother Jin's expression softened and he advised, "Junior Marshal Brother Zhao, ever since we became Master's disciples, we've received the blood essence of a great demon that Master found, allowing our cultivation to improve. Master's kindness to us is greater than the heavens. What's a mere restriction? When we were under Demon Lord Luo, you and I were just idle demon kings. Even though we were happy, when disaster came, didn't we abandon our cave and escape? Now, we can be considered to have entered Taoism. When Master returns to Qinsang in the future and takes the position of sect leader, we won't be considered as people without roots. Even if we reincarnate and cultivate, we can be guided by Master. Even if we become immortals, who knows if we can't do it?" Junior Marshal Brother Zhao curled his lips and said, "Such a good thing. Old Zhao, dare not think about it. As long as we live free and happy, it's fine." Senior Marshal Brother Jean, can't you see that eldest Marshal Brother is polite to the three of us on the surface, but in reality, he doesn't care about us. Right now, we're still useful, but if there's a day when we return to Qinsang School, hee. Senior Marshal Brother Jean shook his head and said, "Since the three of us entered the sect, we haven't achieved anything. Instead, we've only benefited from Master. It's no wonder that eldest Marshal Brother doesn't care about us. But now is our chance. If we can take down this person and take that magical weapon back, let's see who will look down on us in the future." Junior Marshal Brother Zhao laughed and said, Old Zhao, don't think that Zhang Yan is easy to deal with. This person is one of the top 10 disciples of Qinsang School. Although he ranks 9th, his cultivation is now on par with us. I heard that his Taoist techniques are strange, and I'm afraid that he has many magical weapons. If we want to deal with him, I don't think it will be easy." Senior Marshal Brother Jean looked over and deliberately provoked him, saying, "From what eldest Marshal Brother said, someone who can wield the heroic knot-fish drum must be someone that sect leader Qin trusts. If he's easy to deal with, there's no need for the three of us to go together." "What's wrong, Junior Marshal Brother Zhao, are you afraid?" Junior Brother Zhao burped and shook the hair on the back of his head. He said, "Senior Brother Jean, ever since you became Master's disciple, you've become more cunning. If you were to say this to Sister Shan, it would be more meaningful. You're a golden retriever, so you don't like my temper. Senior Marshal Brother Jean was embarrassed by the fact that Junior Marshal Brother Jean had pointed out his weakness and was now being stabbed in the back. However, he remembered that the three of them needed to work together, so he endured it. He thought to himself, right now, Master is more important. I won't bother with a stupid and dirty pig like you. When we get back, see how I'll make things difficult for you. Junior Marshal Brother Zhao complained for a long time, then he lay down on the ground and fell asleep. His mouth was mumbling something, and from time to time, he would raise his hand to swat away the flies that had smelled the fishy stench. He rolled back and forth, and before long, he was extremely dirty. Senior Marshal Brother Jean looked at him with disdain. He rolled up his sleeves and walked to the other side. He picked a clean spot and sat down, as if he was ashamed to be associated with Junior Marshal Brother Zhao. After 2 hours, a red mist suddenly appeared on the horizon along with the wind, mixed with a bit of peach blossom petals. With a flash of pink light, a beautiful woman stood in front of him. She had a slender waist and voluptuous breasts. She was enchanting and had a pair of limpid eyes that seemed to contain boundless affection. Beside her, there was a fat Taoist. His small eyes kept moving around, as if he had a lot of thoughts in his mind. Senior Marshal Brother Jean was overjoyed. He stood up and said, Junior Marshal Sister Shan, you're here. He then looked at the fat Taoist and asked, are you Hong'an? Hong'an bowed and said, yes, I am. Greetings to the the 3 Taoists. Junior Marshal Brother Zhao had also sobered up. He stared at Hong'an with red eyes and muttered to himself, this fella is fat and full of oil. It's a good match for wine. Hong'an was so scared that his legs turned to jelly. He knelt down in front of Lady Shan and said with a sad face, Taoist Shan, you promised me that you would spare my life. Lady Shan giggled and said in a flirtatious manner, Taoist Hong, you are too timid. Senior Marshal Brother Zhao was just joking with you. Senior Marshal Brother Jean did not have the patience to argue with him. He said in a deep voice, Hong'an, since you are the second temple master of the vast Qingdao Palace, you must know how to enter the array. Hurry up and tell me. If there are any mistakes, I will send you to Junior Marshal Brother Zhao as food. Hong'an didn't dare to hide anything and told them the method to enter the formation. However, he kept an eye out for them. The method to leave the formation was different from the method to enter the formation. They were 2 different methods. He only told them the method to enter the formation but not the method to leave it. In this way, it would be fine if the 3 of them won, but if they lost, they would definitely die in the formation. They wouldn't have to come out and vent their anger on him. If you like this work, you are welcome to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 448. Hong'an also felt that he was unlucky. Initially, when he saw that the situation was not right, he escaped from Kuan-Yu. Because he did not dare to return to the Lai Xian Sex Division, he went to the Zhen Luo League. Later, when he heard that Guo and Pang were killed by Zhang Yan, he was secretly glad that he had acted early. The Zhen Luo League had its own people. If he did not have a backer, it would be difficult for him to survive. But his cultivation level was not high, and he had some good things on him, but he gave them to Guo and Pang, 2 people. He had nothing on him, so it was difficult for him to make friends with people of the same Dao, so no one took him seriously. Later on, this beautiful Lady Shan took the initiative to recruit him. She was Jinren Yuanying, and Hong'an just now came here to curry favor with her. He did not expect that she wanted to return to Kuan-Yu, so he had no choice but to come here. After explaining the method to enter the formation in detail, Hong'an said with a fawning expression, you too, I have told you the method, can you let me go? Senior Marshal Brother Jean looked at him coldly and said, did you really tell me everything? Hong'an felt as if he was being stared at by a ferocious beast when he was stared at by the ferocious glint in his eyes. His entire body quivered as he said, allow me to think again. Senior Marshal Brother Jean snorted and said, then go to the side and think about it. He could be sure that what Hong'an said was the truth, but he always felt that he was hiding something. Furthermore, he did not intend to keep this person alive. After he returned, he was prepared to send this person to Zhao Xiong as rations. Hung An went to the side and realized that his back was wet and cold. He was sure that he did not make any mistakes. But he couldn't help feeling guilty and secretly cursed. Looking at the three of you, you must be some kind of demon. How do you know how powerful that priest Zhang is? Even Gua and Pang were not his match. What kind of ability do you have? I want to see how you die. Senior Marshal Brother Jean called Junior Marshal Brother Zhao and Lady Shan in front of him and said seriously, since Senior Marshal Brother has handed this matter to us, we must do it well and not make any mistakes. Even their reputation is going to be ruined. Lady Shan cast a glance at Junior Brother Zhao and reprimanded him bluntly, Zhao Xiong, when you make your move later, don't just stand there and do nothing. If you can't take care of this person, don't worry about Senior Brother Jean making things difficult for you. I will not let you off first. Zhao Xiong snorted and said unhappily, Sister Shan. You're so unreasonable. I, old Zhao, am not as unbearable as you say. Lady Shan sneered, that's good. Let's get down to business. Senior Marshal Brother Zhao, don't say one thing and do another. Put away your old habits. It won't be too late to act presumptuously after defeating this person. Zhao Xiong stared at Lady Shan for a while. He squinted his eyes and chuckled. He rubbed his hands and said, if Lady Shan allows me to kiss her, old Zhao will work hard. Definitely not ambiguous. Lady Shan hesitated for a moment, then smiled coquettishly, glanced at him and said, Senior Brother Zhao, if you really want to help me, it's not impossible. Zhao Xiong was elated. He patted his chest loudly and said, all right. He said, good. Let's see what I, old Zhao, can do later. I didn't train my tough skin for nothing. Senior Marshal Brother Jean saw that Lady Shan managed to pacify Zhao Xiong with just a few words and heaved a sigh of relief. Based on his estimation, it would still be difficult for two people to deal with Zhang Yan. However, if the three of them worked together, there would be no chance of failure. With Lady Shan's promise, Senior Marshal Brother Zhao felt hot all over. He could not wait to press this woman to the ground and vent his anger. Thus, he asked impatiently, Senior Marshal Brother Jean, when do we make our move? Senior Marshal Brother Jean said, Junior Marshal Brother, don't be anxious. It's a bad idea for the three of us to rush into Kunyu and attack. Who knows if Zhang Yan will have his guard up? We need to wait for an opportunity. Zhao Xiong said impatiently, how long do we have to wait? Senior Marshal Brother Jean said, Kunyu is below the extreme heaven and there are no earth fiend essence veins there. This Zhang Yan is a Yuanying cultivator. Is he not going to come out to cultivate? Once he goes above the extreme heaven, it'll be our chance. Zhao Xiong scratched his head and came to a realization. You're right, you're right. Senior Marshal Brother, are you saying that we should set up an ambush above the extreme heaven? Senior Marshal Brother Jean chuckled and said, we're going to set up an ambush above the extreme heaven, but it'll be you and Junior Marshal Sister Shan. Zhao Xiong was stunned. He asked, then where are you going, Senior Marshal Brother? Senior Marshal Brother Jean smiled and said, I'm going to enter Kunyu and hide there, waiting for an opportunity to strike. Zhao Xiong was confused. What kind of strategy is this? Senior Marshal Brother Jean chuckled and explained, I heard that this Zhang Yan is also a very scheming person. Back then, he was the one who used the North Dark Sword to injure my master. Such a powerful person, using normal methods to deal with him will be useless. Therefore, we have to use a surprise attack to defeat him. My strategy is to have the two of you attack together when he is at a critical point in his cultivation. Don't use any tricks to suppress him. At the same time, you have to make him think that many cultivators are coming to attack him together. This way, he will have the intention to retreat and return to the Kunyu formation. Lady Shan's eyes turned and she laughed. She said, I already know what Senior Marshal Brother is planning. That Zhang Yan doesn't know that we have already entered the formation. Once he returns to the formation, he will think that he is protected by the formation and will relax. At this time, Senior Marshal Brother Jean will attack from the side and catch him off guard. Even if we can't kill him, we will be able to injure him severely. Senior Marshal Brother Jean laughed and said, Lady Shan is indeed smart. When the time comes, the two of you can enter the formation and help me. Then, we will be able to kill this person. Zhao Xiong didn't care. Since the two of them had agreed, then it was fine. He said, you guys decide. Do what you need to do. I will do my best when the time comes. But when exactly are we going to do it? Senior Marshal Brother Jean said, Junior Marshal Brother Zhao, don't worry. I still have a few things to tell Junior Marshal Sister Shan. Zhao Xiong couldn't be bothered to listen to what the two of them had to say. He swayed the mane behind his head and went to sleep. Not long after, snoring sounds could be heard. Senior Marshal Brother Jean cupped his hands and said, Sister Shan from the Shan clan is the best at hiding. I have a favor to ask of you. I'll have to trouble you to wait at the High Heaven Realm and see when Zhang Yan comes out and returns to the mountain every day. When you find out, we'll make our move. Lady Shan praised, I accept your order. Senior Marshal Brother Jin's way of doing things is indeed very methodical. She hesitated for a while and asked, Senior Marshal Brother, are you confident in dealing with that Zhang Yan alone? Originally, they didn't think much of the people from Daoist Xianmen. However, at the Pool of Jade Blood, she and Duke Jin couldn't take down Fang Hong. Fang Hong wasn't even one of the top 10 disciples in the sect, but he was already so powerful. One could imagine the strength of Zhang Yan. Although they had already achieved Yuanying, his cultivation level was also average. He couldn't be underestimated. Furthermore, they were considered to be under that person's tutelage. Not to mention Senior Marshal Brother Lu Junyang, even if the three of them worked together, they still wouldn't be his match. It could be seen how powerful the true disciples of Qinsang School were. Those who didn't have the bloodline of a great demon wouldn't be able to compete with them. Senior Marshal Brother Jean pretended to be relaxed. He said confidently, other than me, there's no other suitable candidate. Don't tell me we can only rely on that fool Zhao Xiong. That Zhang Yan has just achieved Yuanying. He probably has many tricks that he hasn't mastered yet. I might not be as good as him, but in terms of sneak attacks, that's my specialty. Lady Shan pondered for a moment, but she couldn't think of a better solution. Her beautiful eyes suddenly turned. And she took out a talisman from her pouch and stuffed it into Senior Marshal Brother Jin's hand, saying, Senior Marshal Brother, this treasure was given to me by an elder of Zhenluo Union to please me. It can protect your life at a crucial moment. Senior Marshal Brother, please accept it. Senior Marshal Brother Jean didn't reject it. He took it and thanked, after I get that fish drum, I'll definitely repay you in the future. Lady Shan secretly glanced at Zhao Xiong. Seeing that he was sleeping soundly, she moved closer and whispered, Senior Marshal Brother Jean, I don't want anything else. I heard that there's a treasure on Kun Island, and it's in Zhang Yan's hands now. If we kill him, can Senior Marshal Brother give it to me? Senior Marshal Brother Jean couldn't help but hesitate. He had also heard about the treasure. Since the Lai Xian sect sent over 1,000 people and 2 spiritual masters to search for it, it was definitely not an ordinary item. He also had the intention to get his hands on it. If he were to just give it to Lady Shan, he would not be willing. However, if he didn't agree, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to kill Zhang Yan. He thought to himself, I'll agree to her first, then I'll think of another way. Therefore, he coughed and said with a smile, what did I say? It's just a small matter, I'll agree to it. Unexpectedly, Lady Shan wasn't someone who could be coaxed easily. She pretended to be weak and put her hand on her chest, saying, although Senior Marshal Brother agreed to it, I'm still worried. What should I do? Senior Marshal Brother Jean cursed in his heart. He had no choice but to make an oath. Lady Shan was relieved after hearing it, and she left with a satisfied heart. However, The two of them didn't notice that although Brother Zhao was snoring loudly, his ears were perked up and his eyes were wide open. His eyes were rolling around and there was a hint of cunning hidden in them. Lady Shan got up and flew away. Not long after, she arrived on Kun Island. It was her first time here, and she was amazed by the wonders of creation. Just now, she circled around the flying sky continent and found a suitable place to hide. Soon after, she stood in the air and waved her long sleeves. Magnificent clouds flew out one after another. They were fragrant and flowed into the astral winds like blooming flower buds. They took the initiative to merge with the astral winds. She smiled proudly, turned her delicate body, turned into a pink light, and dove into it. This was an innate ability of hers. She could use the flower mist to hide herself. When she was invisible, even people with a higher cultivation level than her couldn't detect her. Her hiding place was only a few miles away from Turtle Snake Mountain. With her eyesight, she could see everything clearly. The night passed. When dawn broke, a golden light rose up, piercing through the strong wind and giving off a dazzling brilliance in the clouds. In the golden light, there was a Taoist in a black robe sitting on the clouds. He was breathing and cultivating qi, but because of the brilliance, his face couldn't be seen clearly. When the sun was about to set, the golden light descended and disappeared along with the setting sun. It was the same for more than 10 days. Lady Shan hid in the flower mist every day to check on Zhang Yan's movements. Now that she had figured out the time of Zhang Yan's cultivation, she left quietly and prepared to inform Senior Marshal Brother Jean. However, she did not notice that after she left, an ugly head popped out from the clouds. It stared at her back and laughed, then retracted its head back. To be continued. If you like this work, you are welcome to vote for me. Your support is my greatest motivation. Chapter 449. After Lady Shan came out of Kunyu, she did not use the astral wind to escape to avoid being noticed. Instead, she rode on the clouds and returned to her previous resting place after 2 hours. Senior Marshal Brother Jean had been waiting for her news. He was meditating in a cave. When he heard that she had returned, he immediately came out of the cave and laughed. Junior Marshal Sister Shan, you're back. Lady Shan stopped using her astral wind technique and rolled up her long sleeves. She landed in front of the cave and asked curiously, "Where's Xiao Xiong?" Senior Marshal Brother Jean shook his head. Junior Marshal Sister Shan, don't you know him? He said that he doesn't like the food here, so he went out to hunt for wild food. When Xiao Xiong was at the mountain gate, he often did the same thing. The so-called wild food referred to bears and tigers in the mountains. Lady Shan did not take it to heart. She curled her lips and said, "It's less noisy without him." Senior Marshal Brother, I've found some information. It's not convenient to stay here. Why don't we go in and talk? Senior Marshal Brother Jean invited Lady Shan into the cave abode. After a few words, Lady Shan told him everything that she had found out without missing anything. After listening, Senior Marshal Brother Jean praised her and said, "It's all thanks to Junior Marshal Sister Shan. Only you are capable. If it were me or Xiao Xiong, neither of us would be able to do it." Upon receiving this compliment, Lady Shan immediately smiled like a flower and said, "Senior Marshal Brother is too kind." Senior Marshal Brother Jean also smiled. Then, his expression turned serious and he said in a deep voice, "Let's not waste any more time. Let's wait for Xiao Xiong to come back and discuss it. We'll make our move in 2 days." Lady Shan stood up and bowed. "As you wish, Senior Marshal Brother." The two waited for a long time. Who would have thought that Xiao Xiong would only be seen leisurely returning to his cave residence at daybreak? As he picked his teeth, he hummed a folk song that he had heard from who knows where. His huge body made loud thumping sounds as he walked on the mountain path, like beating drums, shaking the valley and causing the birds in the forest to fly up in fright. Lady Shan frowned and was about to scold him when Senior Marshal Brother Jean waved his hand and said, "Let him be. It's good that he didn't drink." Xiao Xiong's ears were sharp and he shouted from afar, "Before we left, senior brother told me not to drink. How would I dare to steal a sip? Senior brother Jean didn't want to scold him too much, so he calmly asked him to come over. The three of them entered the cave, sat down, and discussed for a while. Then, they agreed on a time to depart. Then, they went their separate ways. Senior marshal brother Jean sent the two away. Remembering that Hong'an was still locked in the cave, he was afraid that he might have missed something, so he came over to question him again. Other than the method of leaving the formation, which Hong'an intentionally hid, he answered everything else. Senior marshal brother Jean saw that he really couldn't get any more information out of him, so he sent a small demon to take him away. Then, he meditated and adjusted his chi meridians. At midnight, he prepared his magical weapon, the talisman, and left the cave alone, stirring up a gust of demonic wind. He flew toward Kunyu. After more than 2 hours, he arrived at Kun Island. As a precaution, he slapped a concealment talisman on his body and temporarily hid his tracks. Then, he followed the method that Hong'an taught him. After a few turns, he quietly snuck into the formation. As soon as he stepped in, he saw that he was in a herb garden. However, the walls and houses had collapsed, and it seemed that no one had taken care of the place. This was a herb garden in the Haoxingdao Palace. There used to be a restrictive array, but when the Xian sect came, it was destroyed. Lu Gua had been thinking about how to set up another restrictive array. She was deep in thought and didn't have time to care about this place. Otherwise, if someone came in, they would be discovered by him. Senior marshal brother Jean couldn't help but feel lucky. If he accidentally broke into a restrictive array, he wouldn't be afraid. However, if he attracted the attention of Zhang Yan, it would be difficult for him. Because he knew that Zhang Yan usually cultivated on the Turtle Snake Mountain, he didn't dare to get too close. Kun Island was vast, so he found a mountain ridge far away and hid, waiting for the right time to strike. When the time came, Lady Shan and Zhao Xiong came out of the mountain. When they were outside the Turtle Snake Mountain, they hid in the strong wind and prepared to strike. For the past half a month, Zhang Yan went to the Jiutian heaven during the day and used the hero's not fish drum to absorb the green yang qi. At night, he used the broken jade to study the 5 elements escape technique. However, he didn't let his guard down and used the sword pill to guard it every day. Another night passed, and his mind came out of the broken jade. He picked up a letter of unknown origin and looked at it. After a few glances, he smiled and threw it aside. He looked at the sky and saw a golden glow in the sky. When the sun was about to rise, he waved his sleeves and flew up with the wind. He separated the strong wind and sat on the Jiutian heaven. Fang Zixing hadn't cultivated for long when he heard his sword pellet tremble and give off a clear cry that resounded through the clouds. His eyes suddenly opened and he shouted, "Who's spying on me?" A woman's laughter sounded in the clouds. Lady Shan walked out of the clouds and said, "Jinren Zhang, I've been waiting for you for a long time." As soon as she appeared, Zhao Xiong also swayed his body and walked out. He held a golden melon hammer in his hand and laughed wildly. His body, which was tens of feet tall, trembled non-stop and looked extremely ferocious. Lady Shan knew that Zhang Yan wasn't easy to deal with. Then, a pink mist rose from the cloud and a nascent soul surrounded by red light appeared. The nascent soul was holding a flower branch in its hand. It was wearing a colorful feather robe and a golden silk belt, which was fluttering in the wind. However, at this moment, Zhang Yan was calm, as if he wasn't surprised by the appearance of the two. Lady Shan saw his expression and frowned slightly. She didn't know where the uneasiness came from. Seeing that Zhao Xiong was still laughing, she was a little annoyed. She couldn't help but say with hatred, "You barbarian, if you have the strength, hurry up and attack." "Why are you laughing here?" A fierce look flashed in Zhao Xiong's eyes and he said, "All right, let's do it now." He raised the golden hammer high and roared. He gathered all the strength in his body and smashed it down. It landed right on the protective light of Lady Shan's Yuanying. A loud sound was heard and half of the red light collapsed in the blink of an eye. Lady Shan didn't expect Zhao Xiong to attack her and was stunned. She said in shock and anger, "Zhao Xiong, you're crazy." However, when she met Zhao Xiong's eyes, she shivered. This person's eyes were cold and he didn't look like his usual lecherous self. As soon as she finished speaking, the second hammer strike descended once more. Bang! The protective treasure light was unable to endure it any longer, and it instantly collapsed and transformed into strands of dust that flew off into the distance. Lady Shan screamed. Just now, she panicked and wanted to escape. However, it was too late. Zhao Xiong suddenly took a deep breath, and all the strong winds within 1,000 feet gathered towards him. Lady Shan felt that her body was wrapped by the violent wind. She could only move half a step before she had no choice but to stop. She couldn't even move her limbs, and her beautiful eyes were filled with panic. Zhao Xiong was a strength path cultivator and close combat was his forte. He was only a few steps away from Lady Shan, so he wouldn't give her a chance to fight back. With a hideous smile, he raised the golden melon hammer with both hands and smashed it towards Lady Shan's head. With a crack, blood splattered and Lady Shan's head split open like a rotten melon. She died before she could make a sound. Zhao Xiong shouted again. He grabbed with his large hand and crushed the delicate body and origin spirit together. After killing Lady Shan, he threw the golden melon hammer away and knelt on the cloud. He kowtowed and said, "Little demon Zhao Xiong greets Sage Zhang." When the two of them fought, Zhang Yan had been watching coldly. Seeing him kneel down, he said, "You're the person who sent the message that day." Zhao Xiong kowtowed repeatedly and said, "It's me, it's me." Zhang Yan smiled faintly and said, "You said in the letter that the three of you are under that person's tutelage. Why did you come to help me?" Zhao Xiong raised his hand and hammered it. He said angrily, "Sage Zhang may not know this, but when we were under the tutelage, we were only facing a statue. We didn't even see the person's face. We only said that he was an in-name disciple. Only Duke Jean Tan and Lady Shan thought that they had climbed up a high branch, but I never took it seriously. All these years, the three of us have only been running errands. But last year, there was suddenly a talisman that could help us increase our cultivation. Now that it's urgent, I suspected that there's something fishy about it. I didn't want to do it, but I was afraid that if I refused, I would die first, so I had to agree." At this point, his face was full of worry. He said, "Little demon, I was given a life incense by Mangyuran, and it could tell my lifespan. After I got his talisman and increased my cultivation, I secretly went to check, but I found that the life incense was missing a lot. Not only that, a part of it was missing every day. If this goes on, I don't think I have many years to live. He clearly wants me to die. Since he is heartless, then don't blame me for being unjust. It's fine if a person doesn't know how long he can live, because he's ignorant and fearless. But after knowing, he's even more afraid of death." Zhao Xiong looked at the life incense, and the more he looked, the more flustered he became. He knew that there's no way out under that person, so he decided to rely on Zhang Yan, hoping to have a way to survive. Zhang Yan pondered for a while, and said, "Is Uncle Master Yugu here?" After a while, the Yugu true spirit walked out lazily, and said, "What did you call me for, Uncle Master?" Zhang Yan cupped his hands, and said, "I'm sure Uncle Master has heard what this person said just now. Does Uncle Master know what kind of talisman it is?" The Yugu true spirit laughed, and said, "Uncle Master, you've asked the right person. This little demon isn't talking nonsense. This is a strange treasure that person took away in passing, and it's called the Bamboo of Knowing Destiny Expiation. This treasure can help 3 to 5 people to increase their cultivation in 100 years, and break through the closed door of cultivation. However, this isn't the right path, and those who use this treasure can only live for 7 to 8 years, and it's not very useful. This talisman was originally used in Qinsang school for those cultivators who couldn't break through the realm for a long time, and whose lifespan was near the end. It was used to strengthen their primordial spirit before they reincarnated, and that would increase their chances of entering Tao in their next life." Zhang Yan thought for a while, and vaguely guessed the thoughts of that fierce person. Although he revealed the heroic knot-fish drum, that person was obviously afraid that this was a bait set up by sect master Qin, but he wasn't willing to give up just like that, so he hurriedly increased the cultivation of the 3 demons, and borrowed their hands to snatch the heroic knot-fish drum. It'd be best if he succeeded, but it's fine if he failed, as it'd just be the death of a few unimportant demon cultivators. Zhao Xiong understood that he only had a few years left to live, and it was shorter than he imagined. He immediately beat his chest and stomped his feet, and cried, that Master Jean Tan should be hiding down there now. This little demon is willing to be the vanguard, and smash his dog head. I only beg that you save my life. Chapter 450. Zhao Xiong was desperate. He thought that since Zhang Yan graduated from Qinsang School and was one of the top 10 disciples, he might know how to save his life. It was better than dying for no reason. Even if it did not work out, he could settle for the next best thing. He would still have a chance to reincarnate in the future. For this, he did not hesitate to cut off his own path of retreat. Although he had been drooling over Lady Shan's beauty for a long time, if he was dead, what use would it be? He volunteered to fight because he was eager to make a contribution. With this performance, even if Zhang Yan could not help him, he could at least point him in the right direction. Zhang Yan pondered for a while. After all, this demon was once a disciple of that person. Perhaps he knew some secrets. It was better to send him to Qinsang School and let the headmaster decide what to do. He said, "We will discuss this later. There is no need for you to fight Master Jean Tan. Just stand aside and watch." Zhao Xiong wanted to please Zhang Yan and did not dare to disobey. He said, "Whatever Zhenren wants me to do, I will do." Master Jean Tan was hiding in Kunyu. When he first saw the strange phenomenon in the clouds and heard the noise, he knew that Lady Shan and Zhao Xiong were fighting with Zhang Yan. He quickly came out of his hiding place and sneaked to the foot of Turtle Snake Mountain. He went all the way to the peak and hid among the trees. Not long after, he saw the strong wind stirring in the sky. The clouds swirled like a whirlpool. Someone was about to fall from the sky. His heart tightened. He gripped the axe in his hands and his eyes were fierce. He was waiting for the opponent to come down and then he would attack. In the air current, a pillar of golden light fell from the sky. A handsome Taoist descended from the clouds with his sleeves fluttering. Master Jean Tan saw it clearly. He thought that the opponent should be occupied by Lady Shan and Zhao Xiong. He would not have thought that there was an ambush here. Without thinking, he leaped out and swung his axe at Zhang Yan's waist. The axe in his hand was also a heavenly weapon. When he swung it, the talisman shone. Rays of brilliant light secretly contained magical power. As long as he managed to hit his opponent, even if he didn't lose his life, he would be able to reduce his combat strength by more than half. Zhang Yan was already prepared. He glanced at him indifferently when he saw him charging at him, raised his hand, and pointed at him. All of a sudden, a thunderous roar resounded, and a bolt of purple lightning shot out from the fingertip, instantly arriving in front of him. Master Jean Tan's face turned pale with fright. Demon cultivators are most afraid of the power of thunder. Seeing how fast it was coming, he could not avoid it in time. He could only grit his teeth and bear the brunt of the blow. With a roar, he flipped the axe in his hand and raised it in front of him. The power of this purple lightning was incomparably domineering. A loud sound rang out like a landslide, echoing endlessly. Not only did the divine weapon in Zhao Xiong's hand disappear without a trace, even half of his shoulder and head turned into ash and flew away. The charred remains flew dozens of feet away. Then, it rolled down the mountain ridge. Although the body didn't have a head, when it reached halfway up the mountain, it stretched out a hand and grabbed onto the vines in the mountain, stopping its fall. It shook a little and a black gas came out from the wound, swaying a little. When it dissipated, the head would regenerate. Zhao Xiong stood behind Zhang Yan and watched the battle. Seeing how he had reduced Master Jean Tan to such a sorry state with just one finger, his heart shuddered, and his eyes were filled with fear. He hesitated for a moment, then said carefully, "Sage Zhang, this old dog Jean is the same as the little demon, he is also a strength cultivator. Now that he has reached the 4th rank, he is like a Chi Path Yuanying cultivator. As long as there is not a bit of primordial blood essence left in his body, he can regrow a broken arm or a broken leg. Even if there is only a part of his body left, he can still regrow it. Normal methods will not be able to kill him." Zhang Yan nodded. This was also the first time he saw a 4th-rank demon cultivator of the strength path. Different from the Chi path, strength path focused on refining the body, and finally, the body would be indestructible. Just like what Zhao Xiong had said, with his opponent's cultivation at this stage, if there was no way to kill him in one strike, he could only try to trap him and then find a way to kill him. Master Jean Tan was hit by Zhang Yan's purple lightning, and he was still in a state of shock. Knowing that he could not do anything, he did not have the time to think about the ending of Lady Shan and Zhao Xiong. He quickly shook his body and transformed into a large dog that looked like a lion or a tiger. There was a golden mane around his neck, and he looked quite majestic. He kicked with his 4 paws, turned into a black light, and flew away from the mountain. Zhang Yan saw that he was escaping, and he thought to himself, in the future, I might meet a demon of this level. Why don't I test this demon's ability? He formed a spell, and the stellar sword pill flew out. In a flash, it traveled a few miles and caught up with the demon dog. It slashed down and hit the demon dog's back. With a pft sound, the sword penetrated 3 inches into the demon dog's flesh. He tried to use his mana again, but it could not go any deeper. Zhang Yan noticed this, and he used the sword to drag it. The sword pill rubbed against the demon dog's bones, as if it was hitting metal. There was a clanging sound, and sparks flew. Master Jean Tan's body shook, and he let out a long howl. He shook off the sword pill, and the wound immediately closed up. His speed of escape did not change at all. When a strength path demon cultivator reached this stage, their bones would be as hard as steel. The flying sword path, without a secret technique, would not be able to kill them. Even though Master Jean Tan was not afraid of the sword pill, he was extremely afraid of the purple thunderbolt that was just now. Regenerating a severed head seemed easy, but in fact, it consumed a lot of vitality. If he took a few more hits, his life would be in danger. Zhang Yan had tried it out, but when he saw that the sword orb couldn't do anything to the demon, he withdrew it and used the minor universe movement art. His figure flashed, and in an instant, he caught up to the demon. He rode the wind in the sky and said, "Brother Jean, if you are willing to surrender to me, I can spare your life." Hearing this, Master Jean Tan hesitated for a while. However, seeing that the exit was right in front of him, and he still had a life-saving talisman that he had not used, he gritted his teeth and ran for his life. Zhang Yan smiled coldly and did not speak anymore. With a shout, Yuanying flew out of the door and stood in the air. A ray of golden light flew out from his back. It only flashed once before it circled around the field and disappeared. Master Jean Tan was running for his life in a hurry. Suddenly, he felt a chill on his neck, and his head slid off without a sound. His body flew forward for several yards before falling from the clouds and landing on the ground. His 4 claws twitched a few times. After a while, with a "pu" sound, blood spurted out from his wounds. In an instant, he stopped moving. Zhao Xiong thought that Master Jean Tan would be able to stand up again soon, but after waiting for a long time, there was no movement. He shuddered involuntarily. Only then did he realize that this demon, who had the same cultivation level as him, was already dead. He was secretly shocked. Wiping the cold sweat off his forehead, he said, "Jinren Zhang has such skills. If you wanted to deal with me just now, wouldn't you have killed me just like that?" Thank goodness, thank goodness. What Zhang Yan used just now was the metal element true light of the great mystery true light. This light had its own mysteries. When it flew out, it only needed to behead the head of the enemy's 6 sons. Then, it could kill the origin spirit as well. Even if it could regrow its limbs, without the origin spirit, it would not be able to do much. After killing Master Jin Tan, Zhang Yan turned around. When he passed by Zhao Xiong, he glanced at him and said, "Come with me." This glance sent chills down Zhao Xiong's spine. Because the scene of Zhang Yan killing Master Jin Tan was too strange, he was also quite shocked. Therefore, he did not dare to breathe too loudly and followed after Master Jin Tan. The two returned to the peak of Turtle Snake Mountain. Zhang Yan sat on a rock and asked in a friendly manner, "Friend Xiao, let me ask you something. You have been cultivating in the Central Pillar State for a long time. Do you know which sect specializes in craftsmanship?" Zhao Xiong was startled. He did not know why Zhang Yan would suddenly ask about this. However, he did not dare to not answer. He patted his head and carefully answered, "I do know a thing or two. When it comes to craftsmanship, Pingdong's Jinling sect is the most famous. However, they have a lot of rules and are not easy to deal with. Other than that, there's also the Zhenluo Union. There are quite a number of experts in smithing. When this little demon was under that person's tutelage, the senior brothers in the sect would often go to those people to refine treasures. This little demon was fortunate enough to go there a few times." Zhang Yan nodded slightly and asked again, "Do you know their names?" Zhao Xiong patted his chest and said, "I have a good memory. I have not forgotten a single one." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "All right, tell me. Don't leave anything out." Zhao Xiong hurriedly told him the names of these people. He was afraid that it was not detailed enough, so he told him the appearance of a few people that he knew. When Zhang Yan heard this, he was shocked. There were more than 10 almighty craftsmen in the Zhenluo alliance, not to mention the 3 sects of Pingdong. In the Donghua continent, other than Butian Pavilion, it was not easy to have 2 or 3 of them in a sect. However, Zhao Xiong only knew that these people were all exceptional, but he couldn't tell who was better and who was worse. Therefore, Zhang Yan could only memorize them one by one and prepare to deal with them when he went to look for them in the future. The sword competition of the 16 sects was coming soon. Since he had the intention to go, he had to be fully prepared. Other than practicing divine arts, he also wanted to craft a few magic weapons that he could use. Especially the tortoise shell that the great demon Gui Zongyao obtained in the past. If he could find an expert to craft it, he might be able to craft a treasure. Actually, in terms of crafting tools, Butian Pavilion, one of the 10 great sects of the Donghua continent, was the most proficient. However, in Kunyu, he could borrow the hero's not fish drum to refine the Qingyang Ganjing. Zhang Yan did not want to go back for now. Moreover, the whereabouts of the disciples of this sect were uncertain, so it was difficult to find them. Since the methods of crafting tools in the Middle Pillar continent were also very brilliant, he might as well search for them on the spot. At this time, Zhao Xiong stared at Zhang Yan and stammered, "Spiritual master, this, that." Zhang Yan smiled slightly. He took out a pen and paper and wrote a letter. He handed it to Zhao Xiong and said, "I can't save you, but you can take my letter to Qinsang School to see the spiritual master. Whether or not you can escape this disaster will depend on your own luck." When Zhao Xiong first heard that Zhang Yan could not save him, he could not help but feel slightly disappointed. When he heard that he could visit the Qinsang School's master, he could not help but be overjoyed. A glimmer of hope was reignited in his heart. He quickly kneeled down to thank him and said, "Spiritual master, I will never forget your kindness today." He did not have many years left in his life, so he did not dare to stay here any longer. After thanking him profusely, he was about to leave when Zhang Yan called out to him. He smiled and said, "Wait. Before you leave, why don't you go to Haoxing Palace and see Master Lu? If you can help him capture Hong'an, you might be able to benefit from it." Chapter 451. Crafting talismans took up a lot of time. If it was short, it could take a year and a half. If it was long, it could take up to 100 years. Therefore, After killing Jean Tan, Zhang Yan only stayed on Turtle Snake Mountain for a few days before he decided to go to Zhenluo Alliance to look for an expert craftsman. This time, he did not use the sword escape technique. Instead, he went above the extreme sky and traveled with the help of the strong wind. In just 3 days, he had traveled more than 100,000 miles. On this day, he parted the clouds and looked down. He saw 2 mountains, one in the south and one in the north, facing each other across the water. Between the 2 mountains, looking towards the heavy clouds, there was another floating island. It was shaped like a funnel, with beautiful flowers and jade grasses everywhere, a waterfall dripping with crystals, and a large expanse of icy mist. Under the illumination of the sunlight, there were rainbow bridges flashing by from time to time, and the scenery was dreamlike. Ever since the Lai Xian sect attacked Pingxi, Zhenluo Alliance had retreated deep into the mountains. Although there were endless mountains here, one should not think that it was a barren land. The Central Pillar continent was rich. Even Pingdong was not comparable to other continents. There were 300 small countries in the mountains with a population of close to 10 million. It was the core of Zhenluo Alliance. After hundreds of years of operation, it was connected to mountains and rivers. The Double Moon Peak was in the middle of the mountains. It was shaped like 2 lotus flowers. Separated by a river, they looked at each other from afar. It was a famous scenic spot. Because the 2 mountains looked the same, even the flowers and plants on the mountains were the same, and there was an illusory fog lingering in the mountains, it was hard to distinguish the real from the fake. Every time people came here to look into the distance, they could not tell which mountain the reflection in the clear water belonged to. Because of this, there was a poem that praised, "The 2 moons reflect on the clear water, what is the sorrow of the fallen city, it is as if the shadow is not seen. The painting mirror reflects the lonely." Due to the obstruction of the Great Formation, it was impossible to fly in the Twin Moon Peak, so Zhang Yan descended on the cloud and landed on the North Moon Peak. He saw that the entire mountain was built according to the mountain. From the foot of the mountain all the way to the peak, there were pavilions and winding corridors along the way. They were all gorgeous and well arranged. He put his hands behind his back. He walked up the stairs. Because he was very fast, he reached the peak in a short while. At the peak of this mountain was a provincial city. The stream of people weaved about, bustling with noise and excitement. Outside the city was a sparkling and clear lake, willows growing all over the embankment. Spring was in full bloom. Birds were chirping and boats were coming and going on the lake. There were also many boys and girls who were enjoying themselves on the boats, playing flutes and zither. Zhang Yan had heard that there were 2 cities on the Double Moon Peak. Back when the Shaoqing sect attacked the Central Pillar continent, the cultivators who escaped here shaved off the mountain peaks and dug up the soil to make a lake. Until now, more than 400 years had passed. He was looking for an expert blacksmith. It was also in these 2 state cities. After entering the city, he walked along the streets and saw inns, restaurants, stalls, tea houses, and gambling dens. Everything in the secular world could be found here. Because the people of the secular world and cultivators of the Central Pillar State lived together, and it was a popular place to enjoy life, the cities of the Central Pillar State were more prosperous and beautiful than any other state. 138000100 The starting lineup. He circled around the city, and after asking around a little, he already had an idea of what was going on. He then headed towards the southeast corner of the city. There was a hill there, and it could be seen from afar. At the top, there was a pavilion with flying eaves and corners. The houses under the hill were connected, surrounded by clear water. Among the dozens of people that Zhao Xiong mentioned, there were actually 2 people who were the best. One was Wei Shudan, and the other was Liang Changgong. And that Liang Changgong lived here. Coincidentally, this person had once refined a few magic weapons for the disciples of that fierce person. If his methods were not brilliant enough, that fierce person would not have sent his disciples to look for him several times. However, to say that Liang Changgong had any collusion with that fierce person, Zhang Yan felt that it was not necessarily so. Otherwise, this matter would not have been known to Zhao Xiong, such an unranked disciple. At this moment, in the pavilion, a spirited scholar bowed to a young girl and said apologetically, "Lady Yu, I'm sorry. Master Liang has been refining a magic treasure for a guest for the past few days and is extremely tired. He's currently recuperating and really can't leave. Please return." This young girl was only 17 or 18 years old, she wore a red coat, and her hair was combed into a double helix bun. Her eyes were beautiful, and she did not wear any makeup. Her expression was calm and tranquil, and there were 20 to 30 people protecting her. One of the maidservants beside her suddenly spoke, "Pavilion Master Liang, are you trying to avoid seeing my wife by evading like this? Or are you afraid that you can't refine a magic weapon? Or lose your reputation?" The scholar had a sincere expression, and cupped his hands, saying, "This lady must be joking. This is a coincidence, I am indeed not avoiding." The young girl's expression was indifferent, and said, "Since Pavilion Master Liang is not free, then come back another day." "Wait." At this moment, a handsome young man in a brocade robe walked out. He had a jade belt around his waist, and he wore a crown on his head. There was a faintly discernible arrogance in his expression, and he said, "Sister Lihua, you don't have to be in a hurry to leave. If you want to see Liang Changgong, I will ask fifth uncle to inform him." The young girl smiled lightly, and said, "Brother Ian probably doesn't know Pavilion Master Liang's temper, and he is not someone you can see just because you say so." The handsome young man didn't believe it. He said something to the person beside him, and the follower hurriedly ran inside. The scholar didn't stop him and allowed him to go in. After a while, the follower came out dejectedly. It was obvious that he didn't find anything. The handsome young man was annoyed, and said, "Liang Changgong, you don't even give fifth uncle face? I am so angry." The young girl seemed to have expected this, and she waved her hand, and said, Let's go." When this group of people left the door, Zhang Yan also happened to be in front of this wide pavilion. A female servant with bright eyes and white teeth came out to greet him, and said clearly, "If you are here to refine magic weapons, please go to the corridor on the left, and when you see a peach blossom forest, there will be someone to greet you." Liang Changgong also had a few disciples under him, and since normal cultivators could not ask him to do it, his disciples would help him refine magic weapons. The servant's eyesight was not very good, and she only saw Zhang Yan coming alone, and he did not have a carriage with him, so she only thought he was an ordinary guest. Zhang Yan stood with his hands behind his back, and said indifferently, "There is no need to go through so much trouble. Call Liang Changgong out to see me." The handsome young man was originally walking out, but he inadvertently heard this, and his footsteps stopped. He couldn't help but look over with a smile, and he said, "Strange, there seems to be someone with more spirit than me today." The young girl also heard this, and she smiled reservedly. She didn't even turn around to look, and only walked towards the soft sedan that was parked in front of the pavilion. In the past, there were some people who overestimated their own abilities, thinking that Liang Changgong was only a smithing expert, and tried to order him around. However, they didn't know that his identity was special. Not only was he a core formation cultivator, but he also had the position of an elder in Zhenluo Union. How could he be seen by ordinary people? The servant was startled, and she immediately said coldly, "The pavilion master has no time to see guests. If you want to see him, then please leave." Zhang Yan smiled and waved his sleeve. Suddenly, a gust of astral wind swept out like a tidal wave, crashing into the pavilion's restrictions. Immediately, there was a series of crackling noises, and it seemed like it was going to collapse. Seeing this, the surrounding people all cried out in alarm, and they all ran outside. The handsome young man's legs also became soft, and if it weren't for the support of his two followers, he would have already fallen to the ground. The servant's face was even paler, and she was horrified. Such a huge commotion immediately alerted the people inside the room. Not long after, the scholar ran out with a head full of cold sweat. His gaze turned and saw Zhang Yan. He carefully stepped forward and bowed, saying, "May I know where you've come from?" Zhang Yan slapped a green Yanggang jade into his hand, and said with a smile, "Take this and give it to Liang Changgong. Whether he wants to see you or not, it's all up to him." Although the scholar didn't know what it was, he still carefully put it away, and then he cupped his hands, saying, "Please wait a moment." Zhang Yan was very clear that if he wanted to see Liang Changgong, according to the usual etiquette, he didn't know how much effort it would take to see him. He didn't want to waste time here, so he cut the Gordian knot with a knife, and used the most direct and effective method. Not long after, the sound of footsteps resounded, and a scholarly man in his 40s with thick lips and a protruding nose and a long beard walked out from the room. When his gaze fell onto Zhang Yan, his expression couldn't help but become solemn, and he walked straight up to Zhang Yan. He cupped his hands and gestured to the side. "Fellow Taoist, please forgive me for not serving you well. Please come in and have a seat." Zhang Yan nodded slightly, and followed him in. As soon as his figure disappeared, everyone present immediately felt their hearts relax, and they all let out a long breath. The young woman held on to the palanquin's rails and gasped for breath with great effort before she was able to stand up straight. She looked back with a lingering fear in her heart. Earlier, that flick of Zhang Yan's sleeve seemed to have caused the weather to change, the earth to quake, and everyone here was pressed down by an enormous imposing aura to the point their breathing was almost stopped, and they were even unable to move in the slightest. She'd only seen such an imposing aura from one person. She took another breath, and said to the servant girl beside her, "I don't know where this person came from, but he definitely isn't a member of Zhenluo Union. Quickly send me out of the city, I want to see the ancestor." Liang Changgong invited Zhang Yan into the inner room, and after asking him to take a seat, he respectfully bowed and said, "This spiritual master, I just now didn't know you were coming to visit, I hope you can forgive me." Although he was a master refiner, and his cultivation was also at the first tier of core transformation, he couldn't put on any airs in front of a Yuanying spiritual master. Even in the entire Zhenluo Union, there were only a dozen or so Yuanying spiritual masters, and they were all people with respected statuses. They wouldn't easily show themselves, so how could he dare to be rude? Zhang Yan waved his hand, and he went straight to the point. "Fellow Taoist, there's no need to stand on ceremony. I came here to ask fellow Taoist to refine a magic treasure, and I hope fellow Taoist can take a look at it." He stretched out his hand, and a ray of light flew out, and a huge turtle shell appeared in the middle of the hall. There were strange patterns on the shell, and there were strange seal scripts. When Liang Changgong saw this item, he was shocked, and he stood up excitedly. He walked around it a few times, and his lips actually trembled. With his eyesight, he could naturally tell what kind of great demon this item came from. He shakily patted it for a long time, and in the end, he sighed and said regretfully, "I'm afraid there's nothing I can do." Zhang Yan smiled slightly, and said, "I've long heard of fellow Taoist Liang's skill in refining, so I came to visit because of your reputation. How many spirit shells do you need to refine this treasure? Just tell me, there's no need to hide it." Liang Changgong's expression revealed a little fear. He wasn't arrogant, and not to mention the other party's Yuanying spiritual master, how could a person with such a treasure have a simple background? Because he was afraid that Zhang Yan would misunderstand, he hurriedly explained, "It's not that I'm unwilling, it's just that refining this treasure isn't something that I can do alone." Zhang Yan looked over, and he fixed his gaze on Liang Changgong, and said, "Who else do you need?" Liang Changgong couldn't stand his gaze, and he fearfully lowered his head. He hesitated for a moment, and said, "If Wei Shudan from the South Moon Peak is willing to help, and the two of us work together, we might have some chance of success. However, he and I have fought for more than 300 years, so I'm afraid he won't give me face." Chapter 452. Although Liang Changgong and Wei Shudan were from the south and north respectively, they did not have much of a relationship with each other. Instead, they had some disagreements. People often compared the talismans forged by the two of them. Although the two of them did not seem to mind, they were secretly competing with each other. After hundreds of years, there was no great enmity between them, but there were many small conflicts. The two of them had only worked together once. At that time, it was to forge a talisman for an elder of Zhenluo Union. The materials used were only slightly inferior to this turtle shell. The talisman forged that time only needed to be nourished for a few years before it gave birth to a true spirit. If it was not for this experience, Liang Changgong would not even dare to say it. Zhang Yan already knew that this matter would not be so easy. However, Guai Tsongya was a great demon in the heavenly abode, so it was reasonable that the remains he left behind were hard to forge. Thus, he nodded and said, "Other than that, are there any other difficulties? Tell me all of them." Liang Changgong slightly lowered his body and said, "To forge this kind of talisman, the materials used are a small matter. I can always gather all of them. However, this turtle shell cannot be forged with a normal furnace. I still need to find a heavenly furnace of earthly fire. Although there is one on Twin Moon Peak, I need the elders of Zhenluo Union to agree to it before I can use it." Zhang Yan pondered for a while and already had a plan in mind. He swung his sleeve and a light flashed. The turtle shell was put away again. He said, "Daoist Liang, there are many things needed to forge this talisman. You should prepare them first. In a few days, I will come back to find you." With that, he turned around and left the house. In just a few breaths, he was out of the building. He looked around and walked towards the nearest city gate. After leaving the city, he leapt up and left the North Moon Peak as a streak of swift golden light, heading straight for the island above the Twin Peaks. He went around the huge waterfall that rumbled like thunder and arrived in front of the protective formation. He stood in the void and said loudly, "Donghua Zhang Yan wishes to pay a visit to the fellow Taoists of Zhenluo Union." This voice traveled far and went straight into the Tao Palace located deep within the island. 3 Taoists dressed in brown robes appeared in the hall at the same time. The Zhenluo Union had a total of 13 Yuanying elders, and they were usually stationed in important cities. The ones left to guard this place were Che Ziyi, Huang Zuoguang, and Shang Teng, the 3 enlightened masters. They didn't need to go out. Just by listening to the sound of astral winds, they knew that the visitor was definitely a Yuanying Zhenren. Huang Zuoguang's face was wide. His face was flushed and he looked like he was still in his prime. He said in a loud voice, "Elder Shang, you are known to know everything in the world. Do you know where this person came from?" Shang Teng tucked his hands into his sleeves and said slowly, "Elder Huang, what a coincidence. I happen to know this person's background." Huang Zuoguang was waiting to listen, but Shang Teng only said half a sentence and didn't continue. He couldn't help but feel bored, but he didn't want to lose face and ask again. He turned to Che Yi and cupped his fists, "Elder Che, how should we deal with this matter? Should we let him in or not?" Che Yi's face was old and his hair was long gone. Only his eyebrows were still as black as ink. He had lived for 800 years. Among the 3 of them, he was the oldest and had the most prestige. If it wasn't something too urgent, he would make the decisions here. He said in a deep voice, "A guest has come from afar, so we should invite him in and ask about the situation. Only then will it be easier to talk." At this moment, Shang Teng spoke again. He first cupped his fists towards Che Yi and said, "Elder Che, please reconsider. According to what I know, this person is a cultivator from Donghua Continent's Qinsang school. I heard that he killed Guomingda and Pang Yuzhong a few days ago. His Dao technique is extremely high, so I don't know what his motive is here. From what I see, it's better to avoid trouble. We can just persuade him to leave, but don't let him in." Huang Zuoguang snorted and said sarcastically, "Elder Shang is really brave. The 3 of us are here, but you don't even dare to see him. If this gets out, won't our fellow Taoists laugh until their mouths are crooked?" Shang Teng ignored him and turned a deaf ear to his sarcasm. He sneered in his heart, "What a brute." Che Zi seriously considered for a moment and said, "Although Elder Shang's words are wise words, our Zhenluo Union welcomes people of the same path in the world. This person has revealed his identity and came openly to pay his respects. There is no reason for us not to welcome him. Moreover, this person has a grudge with Lai Xian sect. Just this point alone makes it impossible for us to reject him. Elders, please follow me to welcome him. Huang Zuoguang said happily, Elder Che's words are the same as what I thought. I'll go with you. Shang Teng was a little unwilling, but his thoughts were deep and he didn't show it on his face. Moreover, the two of them had the same opinion, so it was useless for him to object. Thus, he silently cupped his fists and expressed his obedience. Che Zi nodded his head in satisfaction. His body shook slightly and he said, Rise. Huang and Shang both activated their escape techniques at the same time. The three of them flew up together and landed in front of the formation door. Che Zi used his spells to open the formation door and said loudly, Fellow Taoist Zhang, the formation is open, please come in. Zhang Yan saw that the obstruction in front of him was gone, so he stepped on the wind and entered the flying island. Not far away, he saw three Taoists standing together, and they were all Yuanian cultivators. He landed in front of them and bowed, saying, Greetings, fellow Taoists. Che Zi took the lead to return the greeting, saying, Greetings, Jinren Zhang. After receiving the greeting, Zhang Yan and the three of them sized each other up. Che Zi saw that he was tall and extraordinary, and in terms of handsome appearance, he could be said to be one in a million. He couldn't help but praise him in his heart, saying, This fellow Taoist Zhang has an extraordinary appearance. Zhang Yan glanced at them, and from their expressions, he could make a rough judgment. Che Zi said with a smile, Fellow Taoist has come from afar to visit, why don't you follow Daoren into the temple and have a taste of the tea here? Zhang Yan bowed and said, Sorry to disturb you. Che Zi said, Please. He got up and flew forward, leading the way. Zhang Yan also followed. After traveling for more than 10 miles, there were many temples in his field of vision. They were built against the mountains, and the roofs were connected, occupying a very large area. The three of them flew into the main hall, and after entering the hall, they sat down as the guest and the host. At this moment, the three of them exchanged names with Zhang Yan, and after serving fragrant tea, they started chatting. Huang Zuoguang was originally a cultivator from the Dongshan continent, but because his sect was destroyed, he came to the Central Pillar continent. He was bold and unrestrained by nature, and he had been to many places, so he was very talkative. Shang Teng was silent, and his eyes flickered. From time to time, he would glance over, as if he was secretly observing Zhang Yan. About an hour later, Huang Zuoguang then asked Zhang Yan about the purpose of his visit. Zhang Yan said, I came here to refine a magic treasure. I have already found fellow Taoist Liang Zhanggong, and I thought that everything is ready, but he said that he needs to work together with fellow Taoist Wei Shudan to be confident. However, these two Taoists have different temperaments, so it is a bit difficult for them to work together. Because they are from your alliance, I would like to ask the elders to come forward and ask these two Taoists to work together. Oh. Huang Zuoguang's eyes lit up, and he said, Fellow Taoist, do you need fellow Taoist Wei and fellow Taoist Liang to work together on this magic treasure? There has been such a thing before, haha, if it is successfully refined, you must let me broaden my horizons. At this moment, Shang Ting said casually, Fellow Taoist Zhang, I'm afraid you're not here just for this, right? Zhang Yan smiled and said, Fellow Taoist Shang is right. Fellow Taoist Liang said that if we want to refine a treasure, we need an earthly fire heavenly furnace. Although there is no lack of this item in my sect, it is hundreds of thousands of miles away. Distant water can't quench the present thirst, so I would like to borrow the furnace of your alliance. I wonder if it is possible. Che Yi pondered for a while and stroked his beard, Fellow Taoist is making things difficult for us. The heavenly furnace in our alliance is not our private property, so it can't be borrowed just because you say so. This matter requires the other elders to agree. Zhang Yan smiled. He raised his head and swept his gaze across the faces of the three of them. He slowly said, If your honorable alliance is willing to settle this matter, I am willing to lend you a hand when your honorable alliance fights against the Xian sect in the future. When Huang Zuoguang heard this, he said happily, Is that true? Shang Teng's eyes flickered. Che Yi stroked his beard and did not say a word. After a while, he glanced at Shang Teng, and the latter understood and said, "Fellow Taoist Zhang, this is not a small matter. Fellow Taoist, please allow us to discuss it first before giving an answer. What do you think?" Zhang Yan nodded and said, "That's how it should be." Shang Teng clapped his hands and called a Taoist child over. He said, "Bring Jinren Zhang to another place to rest." Zhang Yan stood up with a smile, bowed to the three of them, and left with the Taoist child. After he left, Huang Zuoguang said anxiously, "Elder Che, why didn't you agree to him just now? Since this person's Tao technique is so brilliant, we can ask him to lend us a hand and help us recapture our lost land. Whether he succeeds or not, it won't harm us. This is a matter that costs us nothing, so why not?" Shang Ting said with a sullen face, "I don't think so. This person is a cultivator of the East Flower Continent, how can he interfere with the matters of the Middle Pillar Continent? Now that the outcome between our alliance and the Lai Xian sect has not been decided, there are still many variables. In my opinion, we might as well grant his wish and send him away as soon as possible after we refine that treasure." Huang Zuoguang said disapprovingly, "Elder Shang's words are unreasonable. The cultivators of our Zhenluo alliance come from all directions, and there is no distinction between the East Flower Continent and the Central Continent. This person has a favor to ask of us, so we can ask him to help us. It's a reasonable move." Shang Ting said coldly, "Elder Huang, have you forgotten about the disaster of the Shaoqing sect? If it wasn't for someone opening a formation to welcome them back then, how could the 1,000-year-old sects of the Central Pillar Continent be destroyed so easily? I've heard that the Tao sect that this Zhang Yan belongs to is comparable to the Shaoqing sect. Just now, you're trying to curry favor with him. What are you trying to do? He was born in the Central Pillar Continent, so he never trusted foreign cultivators like Huang Zuoguang." When Huang Zuoguang heard this, he became angry as well. He stood up and said angrily, "What do you mean? Speak clearly to this Huang." Seeing that the two of them were already quarreling, Che Yi separated his hands and comforted them with a gentle voice, "Don't argue anymore. We're all family, and both of you are accomplished cultivators. Why get angry over an outsider?" Huang Zuoguang snorted and sat down slowly, while Shang Ting turned his head away coldly. Che Zi thought about it and decided to use a compromise. He said, "Since this person can kill Guan Pang, he's definitely not someone easy to deal with. Even if we can't rope him in, we should try our best not to offend him. Since he wants to refine that treasure, why don't we lend him the earthly fire heavenly cauldron? It's not something that can be done overnight. As for the matter of asking him to help, we can discuss it later." Chapter 453. Since Zhang Yan was able to kill both Guan Pang, it was obvious that his magical powers were not ordinary and could not be underestimated. Even the three elders of the Zhenluo Union had to give him face. Even if they could not use him to help the Union, they did not want to offend him over such a small matter. After the three of them came to a conclusion, Che Zi ordered someone to send a message to him, agreeing to lend the earthly fire heavenly cauldron to him. At the same time, he also sent a Taoist child to Wei Shudan and Liang Changgong to pass down a decree, ordering the two to help Zhang Yan forge the treasure together and not to disobey. After Liang Changgong received the decree, he did not object. Although Wei Shudan was a little dissatisfied, he was able to reach his current position because the Union did their best to nurture him. How would he dare to disobey the orders of the elders? He also hurriedly agreed. However, he hadn't seen Zhang Yan before this, so he didn't know exactly what sort of magic treasure material he wanted to refine. At this moment, he didn't care about face any longer and took the initiative to go to the Liang estate, and only after he inquired about it did he obtain an understanding. Although the two of them were experts in forging, treasures like the remains of a great demon were hard to find in the world and they had never forged it before. If there was any damage during the forging process, neither of them could afford to bear the responsibility. Therefore, they had to do their best. After communicating for a while, the two of them ordered their disciples to split up and buy the treasures they needed. Because they needed a lot of things, some of them had to go to Pingdong and deep in the mountains and ravines to collect. Therefore, the two mansions had a total of more than 100 disciples running to and fro. Other matters were delayed. This movement was huge, and everyone in the Zhenluo Union knew that the two grandmasters were going to forge a treasure together. Immediately, it caused quite a commotion. After the news spread, many forging experts came from far away just to observe the two's forging methods. When Zhang Yan found out, he was not surprised. He already knew in his heart that forging a good treasure was not something that could be done in a year and a half. In such a long period of time, and at the same time, with the help of the earthly fire heavenly cauldron, it was impossible to hide it from others. Therefore, when the treasure was being forged, he still needed to watch from the side. This was to prevent any mistakes from happening. If someone was secretly coveting it, there was no need to think too much. They could only kill it. Ever since he entered this island, he had not gone out. He had only focused on cultivating in the Tao Palace, waiting for the right time to refine treasures. With his current level of cultivation, absorbing ordinary spiritual qi was no longer of much benefit to his cultivation. Fortunately, this island was located at the top of the clouds. There was a mountain peak that broke through the extreme heavens, drawing in the heroic heavenly sand from beyond the heavens, enough for him to cultivate. That day, he woke up from his meditative state as usual. When he was about to start studying the 5 elements escape technique, he suddenly heard a sound coming from outside. Is Xinren Zhang here? I am Liang Changgong, and I would like to see you, immortal. Zhang Yan became spirited and said with a smile, so it's fellow Taoist Liang who has come to visit. Please come in and talk. Liang Changgong stepped inside. This time, he was not alone. There was another cloth-robed elder beside him. After seeing Zhang Yan, he took the initiative to step forward and clasped his hands, saying loudly, "Greetings Taoist Zhang, I am Wei Shudan." Greetings. Zhang Yan saw that he was tall and had arms that reached his knees. His face was fair and beardless, his head was like a sharp awl, and his long hair draped over his shoulders. His appearance and dressing were different from ordinary people, so he subconsciously took a few more looks and said, "So you are fellow Taoist Wei. I have long heard of your name. I will have to trouble the two of you to refine the treasures this time." Wei Shudan hurriedly said, "What are you saying, Taoist Zhang? I dare not do my best." Liang Changgong said, "You are too polite, Taoist Zhang. The two of us came here today for this matter. Now that all the treasures are ready, we just don't know when is the best time to open the furnace." Zhang Yan thought for a moment and asked, "Is there a reason for this?" Liang Changgong replied, "If it's a normal furnace, it still needs to be in accordance with the time and sacrifice demons, but the earth fire heavenly furnace doesn't need to be so particular. However, the first fire requires Taoist Zhang to use his own blood as a sacrifice. After the furnace fire burns for 7 days, the two of us can start refining it." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "If that's the case, there's no time like the present. I will now follow the two of you to open the furnace fire." He rolled up his sleeves and wrapped up a strong current. The two of them were brought in by him and flew through the air, leaving Feiyu Taoist Palace in the blink of an eye. The place where the earth fire heavenly furnace was located was in Mount Luchi, 500 miles away from Twin Moon Peak. To prevent intruders from trespassing, there were also sky lanterns hung around the area and disciples were arranged to patrol day and night. In just a moment, Zhang Yan arrived at the mountain. He retracted the strong current and the three of them landed on a mound. Liang Changgong pointed to the front and said, "Taoist Zhang, is this earth fire heavenly furnace to your liking?" Zhang Yan looked into the distance and saw a sinkhole that was thousands of hectares in size. There were more than 100 earth breath fire veins under the heavenly furnace, surrounded by white soil paste to prevent the fire from leaking out. The inside was separated by stones like a cage, and there were a total of 365 rooms, which corresponded to the number of heavenly cycles. When refining a transcendent artifact, the size of the treasured materials could be changed at will. However, even Yuanying cultivators would find it difficult to change the landscape of a mountain. This heavenly furnace was created by the joint efforts of 2 grotto heavens. These 2 great cultivators were a pair of Tao companions. Their original sect had long been annihilated by the Shaoqing sect, so they retreated to the land of Pingxi. After a few decades, hundreds of cultivators came here and established the Zhenluo Union, worshipping the two of them. Now that hundreds of years had passed, one of the grotto heavens had passed away, and the other was also near the end of his lifespan. If the Zhenluo Union was not at that critical juncture of life and death, they probably wouldn't have appeared. At this moment, there was a movement in the sky, and several people dressed in golden robes came from afar. They stood in the clouds and looked down. Liang Changgong glanced over and said in surprise, "Brother Wei, look at that person. Is he Hua Zhaofang from the Golden Soaring sect?" Wei Shudan looked up and exclaimed in surprise, "It's him, why is he here too?" Zhang Yan turned around and asked, "Do the two of you know this person?" Liang Changgong replied respectfully, "This person is an expert in refining artifacts from the Pingdong Golden Soaring sect. In terms of ability, he's probably not inferior to us." Wei Shudan shook his head and sighed. "We don't know what treasure we're going to refine, but we definitely can't hide it from this person." They understood that although the news of the two of them working together to refine a transcendent artifact had spread far and wide, outsiders only knew a little about it. No one knew what exactly they were going to refine. However, Hua Zhaofang was different. Just from the many precious materials they bought, it could be seen that the refinement this time was not comparable to the previous ones. At this moment, the leader of the group in the clouds also noticed Zhang Yan and the others. He immediately recognized Liang Changgong and Wei Shudan, but he had no intention of coming down to greet them. After watching for a while, he left. Zhang Yan looked in the direction where those people went and revealed a thoughtful expression. After a while, he looked away just now. At the same time, in the Feiyu Daoist Palace, Shang Ting sat cross-legged on a cattail hassock with a gloomy expression. He seemed to be thinking about an extremely difficult matter. In the end, he snorted heavily and looked up at the sky. He muttered to himself, "If I don't accept the gift of heaven, I'll be punished instead." He flicked his sleeve and threw out a talisman. He ordered the Taoist boy beside him, "Boy, take my talisman and summon Li Hua." The boy received his order and left. In less than the time for an incense stick to burn, a gorgeous young woman arrived in the hall and knelt on the ground. "Li Hua greets the ancestor." Shang Ting said in a low voice, "Get up. You're the most intelligent and quick-witted amongst the juniors in the clan. I have something for you to do now." Shang Li Hua still knelt on the ground and said, "Please instruct me, ancestor." Shang Ting nodded with satisfaction and said, "You're able to come up." Since he joined the Zhenluo alliance 400 years ago, his juniors and disciples had spread out here. Now, it had become one of the top clans on Twin Moon Peak. There were over 10,000 disciples in the Shang clan, but only a few of them were able to catch his attention, and Shang Lihua was one of them. Moreover, this woman was extremely talented in the path of cultivation. She'd already cultivated to the enlightened Qi realm at the age of 17, and her future was limitless. Shang Lihua stood up and walked forward. When she came close, Shang Ting whispered a few words, and then he took out a sleeve pouch and gave it to her. "All my instructions are in there. You can open it after you're done, and you'll know what to do next." Shang Lihua took it with both hands and said respectfully, "Lihua will not let you down." Shang Ting stroked his beard and smiled, "All right, go." After Shang Lihua left the palace and returned to the residence, she immediately summoned a few strong men and maidservants. They got on the carriage and headed towards Mount Deer Chi. The group of people set off at the end of the 5 o'clock. Just now, they'd arrived at the foot of the mountain. The maidservant outside the carriage asked softly, "Wife, is this place okay?" Shang Lihua lifted the curtain and walked out. She took a look and circled around before saying, "If we go any further, we'll arouse suspicion. Let's go here." The maidservant waved her hand and a strong man came out with an object. It was about 2 feet high and wrapped in yellow silk, but it was not clear what it was. 2 servants took the shovel and walked to the front and started digging the soil. They were all used to doing farm work, so it didn't take long for them to dig a hole that could fit a jar. They then carefully buried the object and covered it with soil, trying to compact it. Zhang Lihua looked again and saw that there were no flaws, so she said, "Let's go." They came by carriage and didn't fly. They didn't stay for long before they left, so they didn't attract the attention of the patrolling disciples. The carriages went south for dozens of miles. After passing a mountain ridge, Zhang Lihua opened the sleeve bag in the carriage and took out a letter according to Shang Ting's instructions. After opening it and reading it, her expression changed slightly, but she quickly calmed down. She took out a small sword from the bag and chanted a few incantations. Finally, she said, "Go." A silver light flashed and the small sword flew out of the carriage. Screams of agony could be heard from outside, but after a while, it quieted down. Zhang Lihua stepped out of the carriage and looked around. She saw that all the maidservants and strong men were killed and turned into a pool of thick blood. She took a deep breath and took out another item. She tossed it on the ground, and a cloud of smoke dissipated, revealing a flying cloud carriage. She took 3 steps and 2 steps and got on the carriage. After sitting down, she picked up the talisman and shook it. The carriage shook lightly and flew into the clouds. It turned into a ray of moonlight and flew towards the east. Chapter 454. Within the earthly fire heavenly cauldron, flames raged and flames raged. Among the hundreds of earthly fire veins, 72 of them had already been activated by Liang and Wei with the help of the banners, emitting blazing flames that surged into the sky. Even from 100 miles away, one could see streaks of red light flashing and soaring. The disciples of Zhenluo Union hadn't seen such a scene for many years, so they couldn't help but stop and watch. Even the disciples on duty outside the heavenly cauldron watched with interest. However, the realm guarding formation was already activated, so they weren't afraid of outsiders causing trouble. Liang and Wei sat in front of the north and south fire vents with 5 colored banners behind them. At this moment, they each controlled the 36 earth veins and slowly activated the fire qi. This fire was divided into yin and yang qi. Due to the circulation of the earth veins, it constantly changed. The two had to carefully maintain the balance of yin and yang. Otherwise, if the qi veins became chaotic, the cave would collapse. If a blacksmith only had a normal cauldron, no matter how high their cultivation was, they wouldn't be able to last for several years without rest. At most, they would be able to create a talisman. What was left was to slowly nurture it in one's acupuncture points, like training. First, the impurities would be absorbed, then the essence would be refined. When the talisman was flawless, only then could it give birth to true consciousness and increase in rank. However, using a human body to nurture a talisman required a long time. At least a few hundred years, at most 1,000 years. To create a profound talisman, who knew how much hard work was needed? With the earth fire heavenly cauldron, the talisman refiner didn't need to worry about running out of energy. They could use all their methods and finish everything they needed to do inside the heavenly cauldron. This way, after a cultivator obtained a talisman, they could cultivate true consciousness in an extremely short amount of time. If they were lucky, they could even create a true talisman. Zhang Yan sat on the stone platform next to the heavenly cauldron, paying attention to the changes inside the cauldron, waiting for the time to sacrifice the blood to the cauldron. The sun rose and the moon set. An entire day passed. When it was early in the morning, the two saw that they had attracted enough earth fire. At the same time, they shouted and pulled out a blue banner behind them. Waving it, a cool breeze came from the banner and floated into the field. It filled the fire door and sealed it. Liang Changgong saw that the fire was ready and said loudly, "Spiritual Master Zhang, the time has come. The time has come. You can use your essence blood to sacrifice to the furnace." Without hesitation, Zhang Yan bit the tip of his tongue and spat 3 mouthfuls of blood into it. Then, without looking at the results, he took a few pills and swallowed them. Then, he closed his eyes and meditated. Even with his profound cultivation, spitting out 3 mouthfuls of blood essence still consumed a lot of vitality. His face was slightly pale. Liang and Wei Xiaobao saw that the flames suddenly dimmed down, and then they looked at the situation. It was as if a bucket of cold water had been poured over his head. The two of them were also secretly speechless. They didn't expect that Zhang Yan's profound qi was so huge and pure that it could even suppress the power of the earth fire. Moreover, looking at the situation, it seemed that he wouldn't be able to refine it for a while. About 2 hours passed. Just now, the fire was slowly reigniting. The two of them heaved a sigh of relief and smiled bitterly at each other. The refining of treasures in the Middle Pillar continent was not like the other continents, where the treasures would only recognize their master after the refinement was completed. Instead, they paid particular attention to the treasure's recognition of their master when the furnace was opened. This action was related to the success or failure of the subsequent techniques, so the blood sacrifice in the fire was especially important. If the two of them had delayed a little more, if they couldn't completely refine the 3 mouthfuls of blood essence, they would probably have to start the fire again. Then, they would have to start all over again and the 3 mouthfuls of blood essence would have been wasted. The first time they worked together to refine a treasure, it was for a Yuanying spiritual master. However, at that time, they didn't have much experience. At that time, the fire was too big, causing the cultivator to spit out several mouthfuls of blood essence. However, the fire didn't change at all. Afterwards, he almost lost half his life and barely managed to pass it. Thus, this time, they were afraid that Zhang Yan didn't have enough blood essence. Based on their previous experience, they suppressed the fire a little. However, they didn't expect that Zhang Yan also cultivated the divine contract. He was a strength cultivator and also had a grade 1 core. His profound qi was so huge that it was beyond their imagination. This sudden change almost caused them to fail. After resting for a while, Zhang Yan also recovered from the loss of his profound qi. Seeing that the two of them were calm and there didn't seem to be anything wrong, he sat there without moving. After 7 days, this ball of fire was completely tamed by Liang and Wei. Almost at the same time, they pulled out the red banners behind them, waved them, and pointed them down. The fire crouched on the ground and obediently stopped moving. It was no longer as tyrannical and imposing as before. The two of them looked at each other and saw a hint of admiration in each other's eyes. When they used the heavenly cauldron in the past, even with the teachings of their masters, it took them a whole half a month to suppress the fire, leaving them in a difficult situation. Today, they were so relaxed, not only because their cultivation had improved, but also because they went back and thought about it repeatedly, trying to improve on their mistakes. Otherwise, if one of the two of them was half a step behind, they would have to spend a lot more time. Liang Changgong turned around and looked at Zhang Yan. He cupped his hands and said, "Spiritual Master Zhang, the fire is ready. Now, we can ask the black tortoise to shed its shell." Zhang Yan nodded and took out the tortoise shell from his sleeve. He threw it down and it fell into the pit of unknown depth. Liang and Wei saw it and shouted. They waved the red banners together. With a whoosh, both of them separated a yin fire and a yang fire from their banners. They supported the tortoise shell and slowly descended. When they reached 90 feet, Liang Changgong kept the yang fire and replaced it with the yin fire. Wei Shudan kept the yin fire and replaced it with the yang fire. Like this, every 90 feet, they would rotate and replace it. After about 36 times, the black tortoise shell had already sunk into the depths of the pit. The two of them stuck the red banners into the ground and took out the yellow banners from behind them. With a wave, countless white stones flew up like young swallows returning to the forest. They gathered at one place and in an instant, they formed a circle around the tortoise shell. They piled up like a mound and looked like a well railing. Wei Shudan took the time to glance at the top of his head. There were more than 100 disciples on flying boats wandering back and forth. He said loudly, "What are you guys doing there? What did I tell you before? Why aren't you moving?" Hearing his order, these disciples came to their senses. They hurriedly threw the treasured materials that they had prepared in the flying boats down. In the blink of an eye, they were thrown into the bottomless pit. When all the treasured materials on the flying boats had been thrown in, the disciples turned the flying boats around and retreated in an orderly manner. The area was immediately empty. Liang and Wei Shudan pulled out the green banners and waved them lightly. Like a fire opening spewing smoke, the flames suddenly shot up to a height of several tens of feet, shaking the pit to the point that it trembled. Streams of red and dazzling liquid seeped out from the ground and accumulated thicker and thicker. It slowly rose from the pit made of white stones and drowned the black tortoise shell and the treasured materials. When it was about to overflow, Liang Changgong said, "Brother Wei, are you going to do the cover pass, or am I going to do it?" Wei Shudan replied with a smile, "Brother Liang, there's no need to be modest. You can go first this time. The next pass will have to depend on me." Liang Changgong laughed and said, "Then I won't refuse." He picked up the yellow banners and pointed downward. In an instant, a gust of wind swept up, and a large amount of golden sand flew up and filled the pit. After an hour, there was no more movement in the pit. The fire and wind stopped, as if nothing had happened. The two of them came down from the rocks with relaxed expressions. With a leap, they came to stand beside Zhang Yan. Liang Changgong first wiped the sweat on his forehead, then he cupped his hands and said, "Jinren Zhang, these treasured materials are extremely difficult to refine. They need at least 8 months to warm and nourish before they can be opened again. This place is protected by a formation, so there's no need for you to stay here. You can come back when the time comes." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "When I was in the Donghua continent, the method of refining treasures I saw was completely different from this. Today, my horizons have been broadened." Wei Shudan smiled and said, "Jinren Zhang, you may not know, but in these 10 days, we actually haven't really started the sacrificial refining of the treasured weapons." Seeing Zhang Yan's slightly surprised expression, Liang Changgong was afraid that he would misunderstand, so he explained, "Jinren Zhang, this method is called, cover the ground fire cage. When using this method, you need to block the exit of the fire, leaving only a few secret holes. Through this method, the treasured materials can be smelted to remove impurities and purify. If the vessel is good, it can absorb all of its qi. After 81 days, the soil will be dug out. Repeat this a few times, and the treasured weapons can be upgraded again." Zhang Yan couldn't help but have a strange look in his eyes. He said, "Oh. The two of you actually have this kind of ability." The tortoise shell was originally the remains of a grotto heaven great demon, and it was already a rare item in the world. However, according to what the two of them said, they could actually refine it again and make it better than before. This was something he had never thought of before. Speaking of his own ability, Liang Changgong also showed off and said, "Jinren Zhang, everything in the world has its use. It's not that the rarer the better, but how to use it properly. It's like those who don't understand only know how to find a rare treasure, and then knock it a little, and then think that it has become a treasure. However, they don't know that this is just superficial work, and they only rely on the original nature of the treasured materials. What kind of ability is this? Is this also worthy of being called an expert in refining weapons?" In the end, his tone was slightly disdainful. At this moment, Wei Shudan also proudly said, "If you only have this kind of ability, what's the use of us? Any of our disciples can be qualified, and it seems that you can create something out of nothing and refine the treasured materials, making them far better than what they originally were. Just now, we are showing our ability." Zhang Yan listened and nodded incessantly. If the two of them could really do this, they did indeed have the qualifications to say such words. However, Wei Shudan and Liang Changgong had forgotten that the reason they were able to do this was because the two of them had extraordinary refining skills, but the refiners of other continents were not stupid. The reason they could not do this was not because of their own fault, but because they could not find enough precious materials. It was only because the Central Pillar continent was rich that they could afford to spend so much money. It was like the last layer of fine sand that they covered was the dust of the stellar heroes that had settled in the soil for tens of thousands of years. After combining with the qi of the earth, it turned into fine sand. As for the refining weapons of other continents, where could they find such good materials? They were all replaced by mud and stone, of course they could not be compared to them. Only in this stage, what kind of treasured materials to put in, what time to put in, how many yin-yang flames to light, these were the skills that were passed down from generation to generation in the Central Pillar continent. Outsiders had no way of knowing. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.